Chapter 491. Hiya! Hiya! At noon, Li Zishuan didn't even have time to eat lunch. He led Pang Feiji and the other marquises to meet up with Dugu Feiying, who had just come out of the palace. The army of more than 3,000 people rushed out of the city and headed toward the depths of Qinling Mountain. Ha ha ha! Feiying, I didn't expect to fight alongside you two brothers again. Awesome, awesome! Li Zishuan and Dugu Feiying walked side by side at the front of the army. Dabai was very powerful. Its speed was not inferior to Dugu Feiying's horse at all. It's my honor to fight alongside you, Lord Zhu. Putting aside his official status, Li Zishuan was a martial arts grandmaster. Dugu Feiying didn't dare to be arrogant and quickly replied humbly. Ha ha! What do you mean, Lord Zhu? If you two brothers didn't save me in time last time, I might have gone to meet the King of Hell. Li Zishuan looked at Dugu Feiying and laughed. Feiying, just call me by my name in the future. I still owe you two a drink for what happened last time. After we take down Snake Spirit Mountain, let's go to the Drunken Immortal restaurant for a drink. Dugu Feiying was very happy to gain the friendship of a martial arts master. He quickly said, My brother and I were just doing our job last time. We don't dare to take credit for it. But the Drunken Immortal restaurant's wine is famous in Chang'an. So, let's have a drink together. Ha ha. Li Zishuan thought that Dugu Feiying would humbly decline, but he didn't expect to hear such an answer. Dugu Feiying was much easier to get along with compared to Dugu Xian's cold personality. Li Zishuan couldn't help but laugh. Ha ha. Good. Feiying is very generous. After this battle, we'll drink until we're drunk. We'll drink until we're drunk. Ha ha. Snake Spirit Mountain, 7 Cultivators Sect. Sect Leader, bad news. A large number of soldiers have arrived at the foot of the mountain. Snake Spirit Mountain has been surrounded. The exit was also heavily guarded. Just now, a disciple from the kitchen went down the mountain to buy groceries and was caught red-handed by a group of soldiers. The general leading the group said that he would not withdraw his troops unless you hand over the culprit. Now, our sect's people can no longer leave the mountain. In the highest hall of the Serpent Spirit Mountain, a green-robed disciple walked in and bowed to Batian. Although he was mentally prepared, Batian still couldn't help but panic when he heard that the army was coming. He sorted out his thoughts and forced himself to calm down. I understand. Immediately pass down the order for all the disciples to be on standby in the previously arranged positions. Whoever dares to invade the sect will be killed without mercy. The atmosphere in the hall suddenly became heavy. The disciple in green, who was sitting below, was pale and trembling. Sect leader, those people are from the Imperial Army. If we kill them, won't we be? Ugh. Humph. What's the point of keeping you if you don't obey the sect leader's orders? Batian and Snake King were bold, but that didn't mean that the other ordinary disciples in the sect had the courage to go against the Imperial Army. Just as the green-robed disciple was about to say, "It's the same as rebelling," a black figure suddenly flashed in from outside the door. As the figure flashed, a thin line of blood appeared on the green-robed disciple's neck. The figure stood still, and Snake King appeared in the hall. He looked at the blood on his spikes, turned around, and coldly said to the disciples in the hall, "The 7 Cultivators sect has nurtured you for decades. Now that the sect is under siege, instead of repaying the kindness, you intend to rebel. How despicable! From now on, all of you must work together to resist the enemy. If anyone dares to surrender, he will end up like you." The green-robed disciple just happened to fall to the ground, holding his neck. His blood dyed the ground red, and the temperature in the hall immediately dropped to the freezing point. What's wrong? My words to the sect leader no longer have any effect? While everyone was silent, Snake King's emotionless voice once again reached everyone's ears. The disciples in the hall immediately came to their senses and trembled as they said, "We obey the sect leader's orders. We obey the elders' orders. Humph. Then why aren't you going? Snake King indifferently glanced at everyone and coldly said, Yes. The disciples in the hall hurriedly rushed out in a line. Batian sat on the seat of honor and expressionlessly watched Snake King's self-directed performance. At this time, he said, Junior brother, have you fully recovered from your injuries? Snake King shook his head and replied, I've only recovered 60%. Now that the situation is urgent, how can I be at ease and recuperate alone in the secret chamber? At this time, he glanced at the green-robed disciple on the ground and bowed to Batian. I had no choice but to kill Qin Fei earlier to calm the people down. I hope senior brother can forgive me. Clearly, Snake King was also afraid that his overbearing action would make Batian unhappy, so he could only lower his head and beg for forgiveness. Batian waved his hand and said, It's fine. Ever since Master passed away, although we're called senior brother in name, we're as close as real brothers. I won't take such a small matter to heart. The most important thing now is to think of a way to make the imperial court retreat as soon as possible. After all, defending the mountain to death is not a long-term plan. Senior brother is right. However, the reason why the soldiers haven't attacked yet is probably because they already know the power of the Snake Spirit Mountain's poisonous miasma. We don't have to panic too much. Moreover, our sex food reserves are enough to last for half a year. If we continue to waste time like this, the Imperial Court won't be able to hold on for long. Snake King nodded and analyzed the situation for Batian. Okay. Junior brother, you should hurry up and recuperate. I'll go down the mountain to negotiate with them. Batian thought for a while and suddenly decided. Senior brother, you must be careful. If you encounter that brat Li Zishuan, if you can kill him in one move, don't save it for the second move. That brat is evil and ruthless. He'll be a disaster sooner or later if we let him live. Flying Snake couldn't help but gnash his teeth in hatred when he thought of Li Zishuan. However, his injuries hadn't healed yet, and he could only use less than 60% of his strength at most. He wasn't a match for Li Zishuan at all, so he could only tactfully ask Batian for help. Oh, junior brother, don't worry. Although they have a lot of people, they won't be able to stop me if I run away with all my strength. As for Li Zishuan, if there's a chance, I'll definitely capture him and use him to threaten the Imperial Court to retreat. Although Batian didn't have a big grudge against Li Zishuan, he had his own ideas. He wanted to use Li Zishuan as a breakthrough point to solve the crisis of the 7 cultivators sect with the smallest price. Senior brother is brilliant. Snake King was a little disappointed, but he didn't show it on his face. He cupped his hands and flattered him. Chapter 492. Behave yourself. Our general will ask you a question in a while. If you dare to lie, I'll chop off your head. At the foot of Serpent Spirit Mountain, dozens of military tents had been set up here. It was clear that Dugu Xian had realized how difficult it was to deal with the 7 cultivators of true virtue and planned to fight a protracted battle. One had to admit that the Imperial Army was indeed an elite force. They were able to set up so many military tents in just half an hour. Strict discipline and clear division of labor. It wasn't without reason that Great Tang was able to stand at the top of the world. A soldier escorted a disciple of the 7 cultivators of true virtue to the commander's tent in the center and threatened the disciple. Sir, this lowly one doesn't dare to lie. I don't dare to lie. The blue-clothed disciple was just a kitchen steward of the 7 cultivators of true virtue. When had he ever seen such a scene before? He had long been scared out of his wits by the Imperial Army's murderous aura. When he heard the soldier's words, he quickly cried and promised. Looking at his expression, he was just short of swearing to the heavens. At least you know what's good for you. Otherwise, this grandpa's horsewhip would have been used on you. The soldier was very satisfied, and said a few words before bringing the disciple of the 7 cultivators of true virtue out of the commander's tent. Reporting to the general, the disciple of the 7 cultivators of true virtue has been brought here. Please give me your orders. The soldier dared to act arrogantly in front of the blue-clothed disciple, but he didn't dare to do the same in front of Dugu Exayan. He cupped his fists and bowed to Dugu Exayan like a docile little lamb. Bring him in. Dugu Exayan faintly said, and then ordered. Yes. The soldier cupped his fists and left the tent. Then, he brought the blue-clothed disciple in. Dugu Exayan waved his hand, indicating that he could leave. Then, he said to the blue-clothed disciple indifferently, "Tell me your name first. Also, tell me where your ancestral home is and how long you've been in the 7 cultivators of true virtue." Although Dugu Exayan's tone was calm, the green-robed disciple felt as if he was facing a monster that had crawled out of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. Cold sweat appeared on his forehead. This was the murderous aura of a general who had experienced many battles. I'm Lu Baodan, and my ancestral home is Taiyuan. My parents passed away due to illness 12 years ago, and I heard that the 7 cultivators of true virtue sect was looking for someone to cook for them. Since they provided food and lodging, I went to give it a try. The sect master felt that my cooking skills were pretty good, so he allowed me to stay. Later on, I stayed in the Serpent Spirit Mountain and helped them cook. The green-clothed disciple was so frightened that he knelt on the ground and answered Dugu Exayan honestly. Then let me ask you, has anyone from your 7 cultivators of true virtue been seriously injured recently? This was where Dugu Exayan's brilliance lay. Although he didn't know the name of the assassin that day, he was certain that the assassin was seriously injured. Therefore, by asking this question, he might be able to get some information from this disciple of the 7 cultivators of true virtue. Seriously injured? Lu Baodan frowned and thought for a while. Then, he shook his head and said, replying to the general, "I've never heard of anyone from the 7 cultivators of true virtue being seriously injured recently." Dugu Exayan coldly grunted. Lu Baodan suddenly felt the surrounding air become colder. He quickly kowtowed and said, "General, please understand. I've never heard of anyone being injured. I'm not lying." In fact, this unlucky kid really wasn't lying. Snake King had sneaked back to the 7 cultivators of true virtue sect that day and had been in seclusion to heal his injuries. Even if he occasionally appeared in front of the disciples of the 7 cultivators of true virtue sect, he still had the appearance of a great expert. Outsiders simply couldn't see that he was injured. Take him away and keep him in custody. Dugu Exayan also saw that Lu Baodan didn't seem to be lying, so he waved his hand and impatiently ordered. "Hiya! Hiya! Sir Li, wait!" On the lush mountain path of the Qinling Mountains, a white-clothed woman galloped on her horse and chased after the sect extermination team led by Li Zixuan. Those who could join the Imperial Army were all elite soldiers. When the soldiers at the back of the team noticed that someone dared to rush into the army, they quickly jumped on their horses and held their spears in front of them to stop her. "Who are you? The Imperial Army is on duty. Unrelated people, step aside." A young general pointed his spear at the white-clothed woman and shouted. The white-clothed woman didn't care and didn't slow down at all. She and her horse galloped toward them. The young general's face turned cold. He waved his hand, and the surrounding Imperial Army soldiers immediately waved their spears, ready to fight. A battle was about to break out, but the white-clothed woman didn't show the slightest fear. She still rushed toward them without a care. "Stop!" Suddenly, a loud shout came from the front of the team. Then, a figure rushed to the back of the team. It was Li Zixuan. The dozens of Imperial Army soldiers in the formation hesitated. They didn't know if they should listen to Li Zixuan. After all, the commander-in-chief of this team of Imperial Army soldiers wasn't Li Zixuan. Then, Dugu Feiying also came over. He waved his hand and said, Put away your weapons! Yes, sir. Only then did the dozens of Imperial Army soldiers put away their spears. Then, they automatically surrounded Li Zishuan and Dugu Feiying. Miss Ling, why are you here? Li Zishuan was secretly impressed by the Imperial Army's well-trained training. However, he didn't stop walking. He quickly walked to the white-clothed woman and asked. That's right, the person who came was Ling Yuyao. Ling Yuyao got off her horse and cupped her hands at Li Zishuan. Lord Zhu, my young master has something to tell you today. However, he heard that you have left the city, so he ordered me to come and tell you. Li Zishuan looked at Dugu Feiying and the Imperial Army soldiers around him. He hesitated and said, Miss Ling, we are preparing to go to Snake Spirit Mountain. If your matter isn't urgent, can we talk about it in a few days? What Yuyao wants to tell you is about the 7 Cultivators sect on Snake Spirit Mountain. If Lord Zhu is in a hurry, we can talk about it while we walk. Ling Yuyao said. Bringing a beauty to war? This Li Zishuan looked at Dugu Feiying who was next to him. This guy was just winking at him, but now, he acted as if he didn't know anything. He turned his head to the side and shouted at the Imperial Army soldiers, Continue marching! Continue marching! After saying that, he turned his horse around and rushed towards Snake Spirit Mountain. When he came to Li Zishuan's side, he whispered, Ahem, little Xian, I didn't see anything. But you have to take it easy. It won't look good if sister-in-law finds out. Li Zishuan almost vomited blood when he heard that. Does this guy think that I'm having an affair with Ling Yuyao? He wanted to explain, but Dugu Feiying had already run far away. So, he could only give up. He might have given up, but it didn't mean that Ling Yuyao would do the same. This girl was cold and arrogant. She would kill someone if she didn't agree with him. Although Dugu Feiying's voice was soft, she heard it clearly. She snorted coldly, picked up a stone with the tip of her foot, caught it with one hand, and threw it at the back of Dugu Feiying's head. Chapter 493. Whoosh! The pebble that Ling Yuyao threw was about the size of a pigeon egg. She threw it with all her might, and the pebble went straight for the back of Dugu Feiying's head. Li Zishuan saw everything clearly from the back, but he couldn't do anything to stop it. He couldn't help but think that this girl was really ruthless. Because if this attack landed, even if Dugu Feiying didn't die, he would become a retard. Seeing that the pebble was about to hit him, Dugu Feiying used one hand to support himself on the horse and jumped into the air, dodging the attack by a hair's breadth. After landing on the back of the horse, he quickly reined in the horse and turned around to glare at Ling Yuyao. You, I'm still the Lieutenant General of the Left Wei Guards, and you dare to attack me in public? You? If it was someone else who dared to play like this, Dugu Feiying would have long since turned his sword on them. However, he still didn't know what relationship Ling Yuyao had with Li Zishuan, so he could only vent his anger with his mouth. You deserve it. Who told you to talk dirty? Ling Yuyao didn't back down and glared back at him. Actually, she regretted it a little when she threw the pebble. Dugu Feiying was also a member of the Imperial Court, and if he was killed by her pebble, it would definitely bring trouble to her young master. But luckily, Dugu Feiying was still agile. You! Dugu Feiying glared at her and trembled in anger. He finally understood how troublesome it was to deal with a woman. Ugh! Cough cough! Miss Ling, don't you have something to say to me? Let's get on the horse and talk. Feiying, the situation is urgent, so don't bother with Miss Ling. Li Zishuan tried to mediate between the two sides, mainly because he was anxious. Who knew what was going on over at Dugu Xian's side? It would be bad if they couldn't handle the situation and got wiped out by the 7 cultivators of virtue. Fine, little Xian, I'll give you face. Dugu Feiying glared at Ling Yuyao and turned his horse around to continue forward. Sir Li, a few days ago, my young master sent a letter to the family head via pigeon, informing him of the matter regarding the assassins from the 7 cultivators of true virtue sect. After the family head received the news, he attached great importance to it and specially went to see the second young master, who is currently being imprisoned by the disciplinary hall. After asking around, second young master hasn't had any contact with outsiders in the past few months, so the assassin that day definitely has nothing to do with second young master. Ling Yuyao rode on her horse and followed Li Zixuan at the very back of the imperial army. The two of them rode side by side. Ling Yuyao whispered to Li Zixuan the purpose of her pursuit this time. Li Zixuan nodded and said with a smile, "I've already said that day that I believe Renbiao's words. I didn't expect Renbiao to mobilize so many people and even make Governor Wang work so hard. He really shouldn't have done that." Ling Yuyao shook her head and said softly, "Young master cares a lot about his friendship with Lord Zhu, so young master must confirm this matter again and again. Also, there's an important piece of news from the family head. It's about the origin of that assassin." "Oh? Miss Ling, please speak." Li Zixuan became spirited and quickly asked. The family head learned from second young master that the flying snake who kidnapped Madame Zhu has a master realm master, known as Snake King. No one knows the specific name of this person, but his martial arts are all highly toxic. Therefore, the assassin that day is very likely to be the flying snake's master, Snake King. Ling Yuyao urged the horse under her as she replied. "Snake King? His martial arts are all highly toxic?" Li Zixuan frowned and nodded. It seems that the assassin that day is most likely Snake King. However, this person is really bold. He actually dared to openly go against the imperial court for his disciple. Even if the assassin was the flying snake's master, Li Zixuan still had a lot of doubts. The most important thing was that the assassin actually assassinated a country's baron for his disciple. This was the most inconceivable thing. In his view, given how powerful the great Tang was, the factions of the Jianghu would definitely not dare to directly clash with the imperial court. Moreover, Flying Snake had deserved to be killed. Logically, and realistically, the Snake King should not have taken such a risk for the sake of a disciple. Or could it be that the people of the evil sect were so loyal and righteous that they dared to go against the whole world for their disciple? This was a little different from the people of the evil sect in his impression. Actually, Ling Yuyao suddenly interrupted. She seemed to want to say something but stopped. Then, her ears turned red. Li Zixuan was dumbfounded. What does this mean? The iceberg beauty blushed? She can even be shy? You must be King kidding me. Li Zixuan suddenly felt a strange feeling in his heart. He thought to himself, could it be that what Dugu Feiying said just now was right? That shouldn't be. As the saying goes, the onlooker sees the clearest. Even a fool can see Ling Yuyao's feelings for Wang Renbiao. But now, how should I explain this shy girl in front of me? Cough cough. Miss Ling, what did you just say? Li Zixuan braced himself and asked. Ling Yuyao's face turned red and white. After hesitating for a while, she gritted her teeth and said, actually, the flying snake was not only the Snake King's disciple, but also the Snake King's Dao companion. I heard from the second young master that they had a very good relationship. That's why the Snake King wanted to kill Lord Zhu at all costs. Dao companion? After hearing this, Li Zixuan's face turned green. He stared and asked, aren't they all men? How can they be Dao companions? Ling Yuyao said angrily, isn't this a matter between you men? Lord Zhu, you should know better than me, right? Asking an innocent girl to talk about such embarrassing things was really a bit difficult for her. Li Zixuan instantly thought of something bad. Holy shit, this picture is so King poisonous. Li Zixuan shook his head and didn't dare to think about it anymore. He was afraid that if he continued to think about it, he would vomit out the breakfast he had in the morning. With a depressed expression, he said, F*CK, so it's two F*King gays, damn it. According to this result, everything made sense. No wonder the flying snake had a disgusting sissy look at that time. It turned out that he had been bent. No wonder the Snake King had such a big reaction when he learned of the flying snake's death. It turned out that the flying snake was his other half. Ling Yuyao didn't understand, nor did she want to understand. She cupped her fists and said goodbye. Lord Ju, I've already told you everything that the young master wanted me to tell you. There shouldn't be anything else here, so Yuyao will take her leave. I hope Lord Ju can take care of yourself in the encirclement of the 7 Cultivators sect. Goodbye. Chapter 494. After chatting with Ling Yuyao, Li Zixuan felt unwell. He lowered his head and rode Big White to the front of the group. Hey, little Xian, you guys finished chatting so quickly? Dugu Feiying looked behind him and found that Ling Yuyao had disappeared. He turned around and winked at Li Zixuan with a smile. Li Zixuan looked at him strangely and said, Feiying, don't think too much. That girl is the personal maid of the eldest son of the Wang family. She has nothing to do with me. If you talk nonsense again, be careful that your head will be cracked open next time. Oh, so that's how it is. That little girl is really fierce. Dugu Feiying scratched the back of his head and said with lingering fear. Yeah. Not only you, but she also wanted to beat and kill me when she first met me. So, if you're not really interested in her, it's better not to provoke her in the future. Li Zixuan shook his head and recalled the first time Wang Renbiao brought Ling Yuyao to him. So he said to Wang Renbiao. Dugu Feiying was startled and hurriedly said, Ba. Who would be interested in her? Hey, but what were you guys talking about just now? Blurg. It would have been better if this guy didn't ask. Once he did, some disgusting scenes appeared in Li Zixuan's mind. He retched and hurriedly waved his hand. Don't ask, that's so cruel. Dugu Feiying. Dumbfounded. General, an expert came down from the mountain. He claims to be the sect leader of the 7 Cultivators of Virtue, Een Batian. He wants to invite you to the front of the battlefield. At the foot of Snake Spirit Mountain, the main tent of the army, a soldier cupped his fists and bowed to Dugu Exin. Een Batian? Sect leader of the 7 Cultivators of Virtue? Is he finally unable to sit still? Dugu Exin muttered to himself. Then, he got up and said coldly, Let's go. Come out with me to meet him. Even though Dugu Exin knew from Li Zixuan that the sect leader of the 7 Cultivators sect was a peak Grandmaster realm martial artist, he wasn't afraid at all. After all, he had never thought of fighting alone with others. He was a general with countless soldiers behind him. He was here to fight a war, not to be a hero. Even though Zhongshe realm pinnacle experts were powerful, they were still defeated by more than 1,000 elite Imperial Guards. Yes. Are you the sect leader of the 7 Cultivators of True Virtue? Dugu Exin led several of his personal guards to the front of the formation. Behind him, more than 1,000 Imperial Army soldiers gripped their weapons and waited. Seeing the tall and burly red-haired man, Dugu Exin asked indifferently. Yes, the 4th-generation sect master of the 7 Cultivators sect, Een Batian, greets the general. I don't know why you've surrounded Snake Spirit Mountain with your troops. There must be some misunderstanding, so I came down the mountain to explain things to you and clear up the misunderstanding. Although Dugu Exin was only in the Qi transformation realm, Een Batian did not underestimate him. He cupped his hands towards Dugu Exin and smiled kindly. Misunderstanding? Hearing this, Dugu Exin sneered and said, If it's a misunderstanding, then why is sect leader Een standing so far away? Why don't you come to my tent and have a seat, then we can slowly clear up the misunderstanding? In order to prevent himself from being surrounded by the Imperial Army, Een Batian purposely kept a distance of nearly 8 feet from Dugu Exin. He was prepared to flee at any moment if the situation turned bad. How could he possibly walk right into a trap? His expression changed, and he said unhappily, the threshold for the general's tent is too high. I definitely won't go there. Why do you have to force me? Let's clear up the misunderstanding here. Haha. The threshold is too high? I'm afraid sect leader Een doesn't have the guts to come here? Dugu Xen glanced at Een Batian and sneered. You, General, don't go too far. Een Batian had been high and mighty in the Seven Cultivators sect for so many years. When had he ever been mocked like this? If it weren't for the fact that this was not the right place, he would have drawn his sword and killed him. Dugu Xien was too lazy to talk nonsense. He waved his hand and coldly said, Enough? Sect leader Een knows very well why I led my troops to surround Snake Spirit Mountain today. If you want me to retreat, then immediately hand over the assassin who tried to assassinate Li Jianshi a few days ago. Otherwise, when the Imperial Army arrives, I'll lead my men to wipe out your sect. A hint of anger flashed in Een Batian's eyes, but he quickly concealed it and pretended not to know. General, I'm afraid you've misunderstood. Our Seven Cultivators sect has always been strict with our disciples. No one would do such an illegal thing. Therefore, I ask the general to investigate clearly and not wrongly accuse a good person. Dugu Xien coldly snorted and said, A good person? You know very well whether or not you're a good person. This general also knows whether or not the assassin is from your Seven Cultivators sect. Therefore, don't play the fool here. This general won't fall for it. Een Batian was dissatisfied and said, General, you keep saying that the assassin is from my Seven Cultivators sect. Then, do you have any evidence? Or can you tell me the name of the assassin? I'll bring him here to confront the general. Een Batian was betting that Lu Baodan, who was captured by Dugu Xien, didn't know that Snake King had tried to assassinate Li Zishuan. Under normal circumstances, there shouldn't be a second person in the entire Seven Cultivators sect who knew about this matter apart from him. He made the right bet. Dugu Xien was at a loss for words. He only got the information from Li Zishuan that the assassin was from the Seven Cultivators sect, but he didn't know who it was. It wasn't that he didn't want to investigate, but Lu Baodan, who was captured by the Imperial Army, knew too little. If I tell you the assassin's name, will you bring him down the mountain and hand him over to us? Just as Dugu Xien was at a loss for words and Een Batian was about to reveal a victorious expression, a loud voice suddenly sounded. Dugu Xien recognized the owner of the voice and was delighted. He turned his head and saw that Li Zishuan had already appeared in front of him and was looking at Een Batian with a faint smile. Een Batian furrowed his brows and asked, May I know who you are? Li Zishuan waved his hand and said, Don't ask who I am. Answer my question first. Do you still keep your word? Een Batian hesitated for a moment and said stubbornly, Of course. Li Zishuan laughed and said, Ha ha ha. Good. Then, please bring Snake King from the Seven Cultivators sect down to confront him. He's the assassin. Boom. Een Batian felt as if he had been struck by lightning, and his expression was extremely interesting. Seeing this, Dugu Xien understood that Li Zishuan was telling the truth about the name of the assassin. He pulled Dugu Feiying, who had just run over, and asked in disbelief, Feiying, how did Li Zishuan know about the assassin's identity? Dugu Feiying glanced at his elder brother, paused, and said, Don't ask. He's ruthless. Dugu Xien. Chapter 495. Humph. Little brat, you've gone too far. My Seven Cultivators of True Virtue sect has never had a person named Snake King, and no one would ever do such a thing as breaking the law and breaking the discipline. Boy, you ruined the reputation of my Seven Cultivators of True Virtue sect for no reason, so this old man will teach you a lesson on behalf of your parents. At the foot of Snake Spirit Mountain, Een Batian's expression changed. Then, he flew into a rage out of humiliation and dashed in front of Li Zishuan, wanting to teach Li Zishuan a lesson. Bastard! How dare you! Dugu Xin was shocked and shouted angrily. However, his reaction was still half a beat too slow. Before he could finish his words, Yin Beishan's palm was about to hit Li Zishuan's chest. Humph! Although Li Zishuan didn't expect that Yin Batian would dare to make a move in such a situation, his reaction was still quite fast. Moreover, Yin Batian didn't use his full strength, so Li Zishuan had the chance to neutralize it. Li Zishuan pinched Yin Beishan's wrist with both hands accurately and quickly. Then, he did a Tai Chi push and cleverly dispelled the huge force contained in the palm. After that, he took advantage of the momentum and retreated 5 feet away, keeping a safe distance from Yin Batian. Li Zishuan couldn't help but feel a burst of fear in his heart. That palm was really dangerous. This red-haired old monster in front of me is really strong. If it weren't for my Tai Chi fist, I would have been finished by now. What a strange young man. Yin Batian didn't expect that his sure kill attack would be blocked by a 14 or 15-year-old kid. He exclaimed in surprise and was about to make another move when Dugu Xian's cold voice sounded. Humph! It seems that Gate Master Yin wants to openly rebel against the imperial court. Is the third-rank crown prince, Zhan Shi, someone you can kill as you please? Soldiers, hear my command. Get into formation and meet the enemy. Boom! Yes! Upon hearing Dugu Xian's order, the 1,000 Imperial Army soldiers, 200 Yamen runners, and the 3,000 Imperial Army soldiers that had just arrived with Gudu Feiying hurriedly shouted in agreement. Then, these 4,000 soldiers drew their Mo sabers and rapidly changed their formation, wanting to surround Yin Batian. Yin Batian was shocked. He did not expect that the person he had just dealt with was Li Zishuan. He also did not expect Dugu Xian to give such a decisive order. This was not the slightest bit of Jianghu morality. However, this was not the time for Yin Batian to think otherwise. He hurriedly circulated his zhenqi and retreated with all his might. Before the imperial army could complete their encirclement, he had already retreated far away. Fortunately, he didn't use his full strength when he taught Li Zishuan a lesson. Otherwise, it would be even more difficult for him to retreat. It's a misunderstanding. General, this is all a misunderstanding. I just wanted to teach this person a lesson. I never thought that he would be the Crown Prince Zhan Shi. Please calm down, General. At this point, the chances of reconciliation were getting slimmer and slimmer. However, Yin Batian still wanted to make one last attempt. However, Dugu Xian did not want to waste any more time with Yin Batian. If not for Li Zishuan's quick reaction and clever means, he would have been dead by now. Thinking about it, the dignified Crown Prince Zhan Shi, the founding father of the country, was killed in front of Dugu Xian. It was not as simple as a punishment. He would bring shame to the entire Dugu clan. Therefore, Dugu Xian was very angry at this moment. He said coldly, Yin Batian, you still want to be stubborn at this point? First, your 7 cultivators sect's Snake King dared to assassinate Li Zishuan outside Chang'an City. Now, you dare to commit murder in front of me? The law of the country will not forgive you. I will not forgive you either. If you know what's good for you, take your flying Snake King and follow me back to the court to confess your crimes. Otherwise, I will bring people to destroy your sect. Hearing this, Yin Beishan's face turned ugly. There was no room for reconciliation now. He smiled coldly and said, Ha 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 ha! Destroy my sect? Ah! Little General Bai Mian, you sure talk big. His whole body soared into the sky. His clothes and hair fluttered even though there was no wind, making him look like a red-haired devil. Then, he circulated his qi and his voice resounded throughout the valley. You want to destroy my 7 cultivators sect? This old man will make you pay with blood. This snake spirit mountain will be your burial ground. Come if you're not afraid of death. Ha 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 ha. After saying that, Yin Beishan's figure changed in the air. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared from everyone's sight. So fast. Li Zixuan muttered to himself as he looked at the direction Yin Batian disappeared in. Li Zixuan was the only one who was able to see Yin Batian's movements clearly, and that was only because he had just broken through to the Grandmaster realm. Otherwise, he would only be able to see a series of afterimages like the others. The terror of a peak Grandmaster stage expert could be seen from this. Xiao Xian, you can't catch up with him either? Dugu Feiying shrank his neck and walked forward to ask. He felt frustrated because when Yin Batian attacked just now, he didn't even have the courage to take out his Xuanya flying dagger, let alone stand up to help Li Zixuan. Of course I can't. This person is different from the Flying Snake King. He's much stronger than the Flying Snake King. I won't be able to fight him in 3 years. Li Zixuan shook his head and said in a deep voice. 3 years? Dugu Feiying opened his mouth but didn't know what to say. Should he say that Li Zixuan was bragging? However, Li Zixuan's battle with the Snake King a few days ago had already given him a huge shock. Now that Li Zixuan was stronger, his opponents were stronger as well. But that didn't mean that Li Zixuan wouldn't be able to defeat Yin Batian in 3 years. Dugu Feiying didn't dare to say that out loud. He could only praise Li Zixuan's ambition in his heart. While they, the younger generation, were still fighting and competing with each other, Li Zixuan had already set his sights on the top experts of the older generation. The gap between people was indeed quite big. Haha. Feiying, don't think too much. I just don't like that old man and want to kill him as soon as possible. It's not because I have some ambition that I have to do this. I've always been a lazy person. Just when Dugu Feiying was expressing his endless admiration for Li Zixuan in his heart, he suddenly felt a punch on his shoulder. Then, he heard Li Zixuan laughing heartily. Dugu Feiying. You. Okay. Let's get down to business. Feiying, did you bring the Emperor's decree with you this time? Dugu Xian asked while Dugu Feiying was feeling extremely depressed. Chapter 496. Big Brother, His Majesty ordered me to lead 3,000 Imperial Guards to support you. We must force the 7 cultivators of true virtue to hand over the culprit. The Imperial Court cannot lose face. If they don't hand over the culprit, we will attack them from the front and take them down. When Dugu Feiying heard Dugu Xian's question, he calmed himself down before answering. It seems that they don't intend to hand over the culprit, so we can only attack them by force. At this point, Dugu Xian hesitated. But if we attack by force, the poisonous miasma in the Serpent Spirit Mountain will cause us to suffer heavy losses. Dugu Xian smiled. Big Brother, you don't have to worry about that. Other than the 3,000 Imperial Guards, there are also 2 doctors from the Imperial Physician Bureau with me. Then, Dugu Feiying pulled 2 frail middle-aged men from behind and said, Come, Dr. Wang, Dr. Qin, let me introduce you. This is my big brother, the commander of the Northern Imperial Guards. Big Brother, these 2 are doctors from the Imperial Physician Bureau. They are very good at detoxification. Dugu Xian was overjoyed. He quickly stepped forward and cupped his fist. Doctors, thank you for your trouble. The 2 of them quickly returned the salute. The older doctor said, General Dugu, it's our duty to treat patients. As doctors, it's our duty to treat, save, and detoxify. Brother Wang and I will do our best to deal with the poisonous miasma in the mountain. The situation is urgent, so I hope General Dugu can let us go into the mountain to check the composition of the poisonous miasma. Only then can we find a way to detoxify it. The 2 of them were quite professional. They were going to test the poison with their own bodies. Dugu Xian's expression turned solemn. Honorable professors, you are indeed righteous. I will arrange for the soldiers to escort you to the edge of the Snake Spirit Mountain to check the miasma. However, I hope that the 2 of you will prioritize your own safety and act according to your capabilities. Don't be too hasty. Haha. Don't worry, General. I know what to do. Dr. Qin replied with a smile. He then turned to Li Zixuan and asked, "Does Li Zhanshi want to go with us?" Previously, Divine Dr. Sun praised Li Zhanshi's medical skills to us many times in the Imperial Medical Department. Li Zixuan saw that Dr. Qin was smiling kindly and didn't seem like he was deliberately messing with him, so he politely replied, "That's all Taoist Sun's praise. I'm only good at treating some special injuries, but the art of detoxification is vast and complicated. I'm not proficient in it, so I don't dare to show off in front of the two professors." Haha. Li Zhanshi is so humble. Since that's the case, the two of us will go first. Dr. Qin smiled and did not try to persuade him any further. He brought Dr. Wang with him and left. "Take care of yourselves." Li Zixuan bowed and cupped his fists as he said. Dugu Xian hurriedly called for 4 bodyguards to escort the two of them. Under normal circumstances, the people of the 7 cultivators of true virtue wouldn't take the initiative to come out and throw away their lives. But these 2 doctors were very important, and Dugu Xian had no choice but to be cautious. "Senior brother, how is it? Are the soldiers at the foot of the mountain willing to reconcile with our 7 cultivators of true virtue?" On the Snake Spirit Mountain, in the secret chamber where the Snake King was recuperating. Snake King was recuperating with his eyes closed when he sensed someone pushing the door open. He opened his eyes and saw that it was Batian. Sigh. Batian sighed deeply and sat on the stone bench next to him. He said, "No. They're determined to catch you now, junior brother. It seems that a fierce battle is inevitable." Snake King was delighted. In the end, he didn't want the 7 cultivators of true virtue to reconcile with the imperial court just like that. If that happened, it would be like having a sword pressed against his neck all the time, and he would have to be on guard against Li Zixuan's sudden revenge. Looking at Batian's expression, it seemed that he had shed all pretense of cordiality with the army at the foot of the mountain. In that case, he wouldn't be the only one fighting. With so many people fighting side by side with him, it would be a lot easier for him. Although he thought so in his heart, the Snake King did not dare to show it on his face. He pretended to sigh helplessly and said, he sighed and said, "Sigh. It's all my fault for being too reckless and causing the sect to fall into such a situation. Otherwise, senior brother would have just handed me over as a scapegoat. After all, the imperial court is powerful." "Bullshit." Batian angrily slammed the stone table and said, "This old man has told you more than once that I, Batian, will never betray my fellow sect members. Junior brother, don't say such words again in the future." Snake King said with a touched face, "Junior brother will always remember senior brother's righteousness. If we can survive this calamity, I, Flying Snake, will definitely follow senior brother's lead in the future." Batian was somewhat relieved to hear this. He waved his hand and said, "Junior brother, you don't have to do this. However, this old man did meet Li Zixuan, the person you wanted to assassinate earlier, at the foot of the mountain." Snake King immediately became spirited and said excitedly, "Oh? Did senior brother take the opportunity to kill him?" This old fart had been looking forward to Li Zixuan's violent death all this time. At this moment, he looked at Batian with a hopeful expression, praying that he would hear the answer he had been dreaming of. "No. Although I attacked him before, I didn't know that the kid was Li Zixuan when I attacked. I only wanted to teach him a lesson, so I didn't use my full strength. In the end, that kid dodged it." Batian shook his head and explained. Then, he frowned and sighed. "That kid's kung fu is quite strange. Although I didn't use my full strength, it's still not something that a kid who just entered the Grandmaster realm could dodge. Junior brother, it seems that you didn't lose to that kid in vain." Snake King's face was filled with shame. From a certain perspective, he was the one who made Li Zixuan what he was today. If it weren't for him, Li Zixuan might not have become a Grandmaster. His existence only served to highlight how outstanding Li Zixuan was. Senior brother, that kid's kung fu is strange. Every move seems weak, but it's actually very powerful. If there's a chance to seriously injure him, we have to force him to tell us what kung fu he's learned before killing him. Snake King thought for a moment and said coldly. Hearing this, Yin Beishan's eyes inevitably flashed with greed. He nodded and said, "What junior brother said makes sense. But the most important thing right now is to find a way to help the 7 cultivators of true virtue survive this crisis." Snake King smiled indifferently and said, "Senior brother, if they want to attack the mountain, just let them. In any case, the 7 cultivators of true virtue has already arranged everything. I don't believe that they can withstand the poisonous miasma in the mountain and the ambush at the mountain pass. Even if these can't stop them, we still have a final trump card." Final trump card? Yin Batian looked at Snake King strangely. Then, as if he had thought of something, his face suddenly changed and he said, "Junior brother, you mean?" Chapter 497. At the foot of Snake Spirit Mountain. Under the escort of 4 Imperial guards, the 2 doctors from the Imperial Medical Department gradually arrived at the edge of the Snake Spirit Mountain. Seeing that the entire mountain forest was shrouded in a faintly discernible black fog, Dr. Wang worriedly said, "That's right. Brother Qin, I'm afraid this mountain is full of poisonous creatures. Otherwise, how could it produce so much miasma?" Dr. Qin nodded thoughtfully and replied, "That is indeed the case. I have never seen such a dense and solid barrier before. Fortunately, Dugu Xin did not rashly lead his troops to attack the mountain. Otherwise, we would have suffered heavy losses. How about this? I'll go in first to test the miasma's composition. Brother Wang, you stay behind me. If I'm unfortunately poisoned and faint, I'll rely on you." "Dr. Qin, you mustn't." Before Dr. Wang could speak, one of the guards behind them stopped him. "When we came out just now, the general personally instructed us to ensure the safety of the 2 of you. If Dr. Qin wants to test the poison, why don't you let me go in and experience it? If I'm poisoned, Dr. Qin can find a way to detoxify me. That way, you can also figure out the composition of the miasma." The other 3 soldiers also expressed their willingness to go into the mountain to test the poison. Dr. Qin and Dr. Wang looked at each other. They did not expect things to develop to this point. However, as a doctor, Dr. Qin shook his head and said, "I appreciate the general's kindness, but the 2 of us still do not know the composition of the miasma. If the general rashly enters the mountain and is unfortunately poisoned, what if our abilities are limited and we can't save you? How will we have the face to stand in the apricot forest in the future? Besides, if I personally test the poison, I can quickly find out the composition of the miasma. So, please don't stop me. Military intelligence is like fire." When the 4 guards heard this, they hesitated. They did not know if they should listen to the command. At this moment, Dr. Wang said, "Brother Qin is right. Testing and detoxifying the poison is the responsibility of a doctor. It's not worthwhile to involve the generals. Don't worry, Dr. Qin has been immersed in the medical field for many years. He knows what to do. Nothing will happen." At this moment, Dr. Qin had already handed his medicine box to a soldier. Then, he brushed his sleeves and said to the first guard who said he wanted to help test the poison, "I'll go. Don't worry, little general. It should be fine." After saying that, he turned around and walked up the mountain path. The Imperial Guard did not expect a weak doctor like Dr. Qin to be so brave. He was stunned for a moment before he quickly bowed and said loudly, "Dr. Qin, take care," in the central tent. Dugu Xin could not help but ask how Li Zixuan knew that the assassin was Snake King. Li Zixuan then repeated the information that Lung Yuyao had told him on the way here. Of course, Li Zixuan would never mention that Snake King and Flying Snake were good friends, as he was afraid of polluting his ears. "Oh, Did that mean that Batian was lying on purpose? I didn't expect that there would be such a loyal and righteous person in a small Jianghu evil sect. If it was any other sect, the Snake King would definitely be abandoned. Dugu Xian shook his head and sighed. Li Zishuan did not believe that Batian was a loyal and righteous person. There must be another reason why he did not give up on Snake King. It definitely had nothing to do with being loyal and righteous. He could tell this from the relationship between Snake King and Flying Snake. Dugu Feiying looked at his brother and said, "Big brother, that Batian almost got away with his sweet talk. We can't let him go so easily." Dugu Xian nodded and said, "Of course, I won't let him go." But when Batian escaped, he said those harsh words. It's obvious that he has something to rely on. So, we have to be careful. Xiao Xian, what do you think? Dugu Xian then looked at Li Zishuan and asked, "Xiao Xian, what do you think? Yuanfang, what do you think?" Li Zishuan almost vomited blood. This guy obviously did not come from the modern world. How could he be such a prank? However, although Li Zishuan was depressed, he could not explain further. He took a deep breath and said to Dugu Xian, "Xian, you're right. Not to mention that Batian is a martial arts master at the peak of the Grand Master realm, the geographical environment of the Snake Spirit Mountain itself is enough for us to be cautious. Now, let's see when the two doctors from the Imperial Medical Department can make the antidote. Only then can we proceed to the next step." Xian? Dugu Xian and Dugu Feiying were dumbfounded. What the hell was Xian? Li Zishuan said with a matter-of-fact face, "What's wrong? Feiying and I call each other friends and brothers. Xian, you're Feiying's brother. How dare you call me Xian?" "No. It's me calling you Xian. Is there anything wrong with that?" Li Zishuan did not change his words and almost said, "Do you dare to answer me if I call you Xian?" If he really said that, it would probably be a big deal. Dugu Xian was speechless. He felt that Li Zishuan's words were very reasonable, but he felt that calling him Xian was very awkward. "There's nothing wrong with that. Haha. You should call him that." Dugu Feiying didn't mind watching the commotion and laughed loudly at the side. Reporting to the general, the two doctors from the Imperial Medical Department are back. Just as they were talking and laughing, a soldier came in from outside the tent. It was Ma Liao's bodyguard who took the initiative to test the poison for Dr. Qin. He bowed and said after entering the tent. Dugu Xian's spirit was lifted. He quickly waved his hand and said, "Why aren't you inviting them in?" The soldier in the tent hesitated for a moment and lowered his head, not daring to make a sound. Li Zishuan's heart skipped a beat. He suddenly had a bad feeling. He took 2 steps forward and asked in a deep voice, "What's wrong? Did something happen to the 2 doctors?" The 2 brothers, Dugu Xian and Dugu Feiying, were shocked when they heard this and turned their attention to him. The soldier kneeled and cupped his fist. "I have failed in my duty and failed to protect the 2 doctors. Just now at Snake Spirit Mountain, Dr. Qin risked his life to test the poison alone in order to analyze the toxicity of the gas in the mountain. In the end, in less than 15 minutes, Dr. Qin staggered out with a purplish-black face. Dr. Wang is now doing his best to save Dr. Qin." "What?" Dugu Xian's expression changed. He came in front of the soldier in a flash and said hurriedly, "Cut the crap, Du Chun and the rest of you will be punished for your negligence in the future. Bring me to see Dr. Qin now." Du Chun quickly got up and said, "Yes, General. Please come with me." The few people in the tent hurriedly followed Du Chun out. Chapter 498. Dr. Wang, how is Dr. Qin? Dugu Shinran's voice came from a side tent not far from the commander's tent. Then, he quickly walked in with Li Zishuan and Dugu Feiying. "General, Dugu, don't worry. This old man is not in danger." Before Dr. Wang could say anything, Dr. Qin, who was lying on the bed, said weakly, His lips were cracked and his cheeks were dark purple. He looked very scary. Hearing that Dr. Qin could still speak, the three people who came in couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. However, when they saw Dr. Qin's face, Li Zixuan couldn't help but gasp. He hurriedly said, "Dr. Qin, you've been poisoned too deeply. It's better if you don't speak. Elder Wang, what poison is in Dr. Qin? Is there a way to detoxify it?" Li Zixuan admired Dr. Qin from the bottom of his heart. Although he had only known them for less than half a day, Li Zixuan had already developed a sense of admiration for the two doctors from the Imperial Physician Department in front of him. A doctor's benevolence. Dr. Qin's actions were the best interpretation of this phrase. "Don't worry, Dr. Li. I'm doing my best to prepare the medicine according to Brother Qin's description. Overall, there shouldn't be any major problems." Dr. Wang was holding a small booklet and kept writing and drawing on it. When he heard Li Zixuan's question, he answered without turning his head. Li Zixuan hurriedly said, "That's good. Dr. Wang, you focus on preparing the medicine first. No one will disturb you during this time. We'll wait on the side." "Okay." Dr. Wang nodded and then asked Dr. Qin, who was lying on the bed, "Brother Qin, I've already suppressed the poison in your body with golden needles. You can continue speaking. Don't be too loud, otherwise you'll waste a lot of energy." Li Zixuan and the other two were holding their breath. They didn't even dare to breathe loudly. They were afraid that they would make noise and affect Dr. Wang's ability to listen to Dr. Qin. The Serpent Spirit. Mountain's barrier qi contains poison. If an ordinary person enters within less than a quarter of an hour, the poison will enter his body. If he is not treated in time, he will definitely die from the poison. This old man went to Lingnan a few years ago. Over there the ground is hot and humid, and it's easy to form obstructive qi. Ordinary people stay there for a few days, and they'll get swollen diarrhea, but it won't cause death. Right now this Serpent Spirit Mountain is not as simple as barrier qi. This old man guesses that this barrier qi is mixed with poisonous gas. As for why there is poisonous gas, it must be because this mountain has been entrenched for a long time with a large amount of highly poisonous things. As the saying goes, obstructive qi, poisonous fog. Shooting engineer, a hoe, ghost hoe, shaped like a turtle with 3 legs, also known as short fox. Sand lice, a type of tiny but extremely poisonous louse, and the scourge of snakes. There's nothing that can't be found in the water, from Wei Shu, the biography of Sima Rui. Therefore, the poisonous creatures in this Serpent Spirit Mountain were none other than archers, sand lice, or serpents, nothing more. But according to my symptoms, I dare to conclude that the poison in this poison barrier is most likely snake venom. Brother Wang, you can use the antidote method to detoxify me. Dr. Wang listened attentively by the bedside. After Dr. Qin finished speaking, he quickly nodded and said, "Okay, Brother Qin, I understand. Don't say anything and rest well. I'll go and prepare the medicine for you now." Then, he walked to the square table next to him, bent over the table, and began to write the prescription. Dr. Qin, who was lying on the bed, looked at the ceiling and said to himself, "Ha ha. Brother Wang, you've always been better than me when it comes to detoxification and prescription. With you around, this old man can rest assured." This was also one of the reasons why he insisted on testing the poison himself. In less than a quarter of an hour, Dr. Wang had finished writing the prescription. He checked it, then walked to Dugu Xian and said, "General Dugu Xian, I've written the prescription." "General Dugu, I've finished writing the prescription. There are some herbs that we brought with us when we came, but there are a few rare herbs that we didn't bring with us, so please." Dugu Ling Tian said. "No problem. Dr. Wang, give me the prescription quickly. I'll send someone back to Chang. and on a fast horse to bring these herbs for you." Without waiting for Dr. Wang to finish, Dugu Xian quickly interrupted him. "Thank you for your trouble." Dr. Wang thanked him and passed the prescription to Dugu Xian. He also told him about the few herbs that he needed. Dugu Xian immediately turned around and was about to go out to find someone to get the herbs. Dugu Feiying stood out and said, "Brother, let me get the herbs. My horse runs fast." Dugu Xian thought for a while and nodded. "Okay, I'll let you go. But Feiying, not only do you have to go quickly, but also be careful." "I understand, brother." Dugu Feiying saluted Li Zixuan with his fists and turned around to leave the side tent. "Dr. Qin, take care of yourself. Dr. Wang, if you need any help, just send someone to call me," Dugu Xian said and was about to leave with Li Zixuan. But Dr. Qin, who was lying on the bed, spoke again. His voice was weak and weak. "The two of you, please wait." Li Zixuan and Dugu Xian were both martial artists. Their hearing was very strong, so they naturally heard Dr. Qin's call. "Dr. Qin, do you have any other orders?" Li Zixuan came to the bed and asked softly. "Order? I don't dare, this old man just wants to remind." "General, Duguan, Li Zhanshi." On the surface, the Serpent Spirit Mountain looked calm and serene. But in reality there were hidden dangers everywhere. Snake Spirit Mountain, Snake Spirit Mountain. I'm afraid the things in this mountain should be, as the name of this mountain should be, filled with extremely poisonous snakes everywhere. So, General, you must think of a perfect plan to reduce the casualties. Dr. Qin's voice was as soft as a mosquito's. Dugu Xian nodded seriously and said, "Don't worry, Dr. Qin. I, Dugu Xian, am not a reckless person. I will not let the soldiers lose their lives for no reason. You should take the time to recuperate." After a few more words, Dugu Xian and Li Zixuan walked out together. Li Zixuan's heart was heavy. After all, this battle on Snake Spirit Mountain was all because of his own personal grudge. But now, he realized that Dr. Qin had taken such a risk for his own personal grudge. Li Zixuan would be lying if he said that he did not feel guilty. Huff! I hope Dr. Wang can come up with the antidote as soon as possible. This way, not only can Dr. Qin be saved, but the rest of the soldiers will also have fewer casualties when they go up the mountain. Since he could not change anything, Li Zixuan could only pray twice in his heart. Chapter 499. Lord Zhu, Dr. Qin is getting better. General Dugu has already rushed over. Do you want to go and take a look? The next morning, Li Zixuan was woken up in his tent. When he opened his eyes, he saw the shadow of a soldier outside. Yesterday, in order to help the army attack the mountain, Dr. Qin did not hesitate to use his own body to test the poison. As the initiator of the family extermination mission, how could he abandon the army and go home alone to hug his wife? Therefore, he spent the night in his tent. Of course, his family had already sent a message back, so his father and mother would not be too worried. What? Dr. Qin is better? I know. Tell General Dugu that I will go immediately. When Li Zixuan heard the news, he immediately lost his sleepiness. He shouted at the soldier outside and immediately got up to put on his clothes. After a while, Li Zixuan washed up and went to the side tent where Dr. Qin was lying. From outside, he could hear the voices inside. Most importantly, he heard Dr. Qin's voice full of energy. Clearly, just by listening to his voice, he could tell that Dr. Qin's poison was no longer a problem. Li Zixuan's expression relaxed slightly. He hurriedly lifted the curtain and walked in. Dr. Qin, is your poison cured? Li Zixuan came to the bed and looked at Dr. Qin, whose face was glowing red, and asked with a smile. Thank you Li Zhanshi for your concern. The snake poison in my body is completely cured. I think I will be able to get out of bed and walk in the afternoon. Dr. Qin was half lying on the bed, stroking his beard and smiling. Li Zishuan was completely relieved. He laughed and said, "Ha ha! That's great. Dr. Wang, since you can cure the poison in Dr. Qin's body, can you also create a drug that can avoid the poison in Snake Spirit Mountain?" This was not only what Li Zishuan was concerned about, but it was also the reason why Dr. Qin risked his life to test the poison. Of course. Li Zhanshe, I have already discussed the formula of the anti-poison drug with Brother Qin. We will do some verification in the morning and it will be a success. At that time, we will be able to break the poison barrier of the Snake Spirit Mountain. The way of detoxification had always been Dr. Wang's pride. When he heard Li Zishuan's question, he cupped his hands and smiled confidently. All right. The two imperial physicians were so conscientious that they didn't even hesitate to put themselves in danger. Their medical ethics were so high that I admire them. After the army returns to the court, I will personally ask His Majesty to reward the two of you. Li Zishuan laughed and cupped his hands towards the two doctors from the Imperial Physician Department. Dr. Wang and Dr. Qin hurriedly waved their hands and said, Li Zhanshe, you're exaggerating. These are all our duties. We dare not take credit for it. Li Zishuan shook his head and said, It's not right for the two of you to say that. If it were someone else doing the same thing, it would be very difficult for them to be as conscientious as the two of you. Meritorious deeds should be rewarded and wrongdoings should be punished. His Majesty will not bury meritorious people for no reason. Therefore, this is the credit that the two of you deserve. There is no need for you to refuse. Dugu Xian also chimed in, Lord Zhu is right. If it weren't for the two of you, the Imperial Army of the Northern Yamen would have suffered heavy losses. If the two of you can create an antidote that can protect the Imperial Army from the poison barrier, I will personally reward the two of you when we return to the court. Dr. Wang and Dr. Qin looked at each other and cupped their hands together. Thank you, Li Zhanshe. Thank you, General Dugu. That afternoon, the two old imperial physicians had created the antidote to the snake venom of the Snake Spirit Mountain. Everyone in the team of more than 3,000 people was given a portion of the antidote. Under the supervision of the various generals, they took the antidote. With such a large amount of medicine being consumed, it was natural that a batch of medicinal herbs had to be transported from Chang'an. These were all personally arranged by Dugu Feiying. In addition, he also brought back a large batch of realgar powder according to Li Zishuan's instructions. Li Zishuan did not forget what Dr. Qin said yesterday when he was critically ill. Therefore, he made such an arrangement. Snakes were afraid of realgar. This was common knowledge that most people in the modern world knew. But why would snakes be afraid of realgar? Most people didn't know the reason behind it. Realgar was a type of mineral. Realgar powder was the powder form of realgar ore. The main ingredient was arsenic disulfide. Its color ranged from bright yellow to reddish, but yellow was more common. Therefore, it was called realgar. Arsenic disulfide itself was not poisonous. However, after oxidation, it produced arsenic trioxide, arsenic, which was highly toxic. Therefore, realgar powder had to be used appropriately. It could not be used under high temperatures. After high temperatures, it would become highly toxic. Realgar is a type of stomach poison. Stomach poison is a poison that acts on the stomach and other digestive systems of pests to produce a lethal effect. Currently, almost all of the rodenticides used were stomach poisons, and snakes were very sensitive to it. However, after adding alcohol, realgar could drive snakes further away and was more effective. The reason was that alcohol could be used as a thinner to enhance the volatilization of realgar. Whether it was realgar wine or realgar powder, they could not completely cause direct harm to snake. However, realgar wine and realgar powder did have a certain repelling effect on snake. When snakes encountered these two things, they would choose to avoid them if they had other options. Yes, note that this was only if there were other options. If there were no other options, it was hard to say if snakes would still be afraid of Realgar. General Dugu, Li Jianshi, this antidote will only be effective for 4 hours at most. In other words, after 3 hours, regardless of whether you have taken down the Snake Spirit Mountain or not, you must prepare to leave the mountain. Otherwise, many soldiers will have to stay on the Snake Spirit Mountain forever. You must remember. The soldiers of the 3 armies had gathered in front of the military tent. Just as Dugu Xin was about to go up and mobilize the soldiers, Professor Qin suddenly pulled him back and said earnestly. Dugu Xin was stunned when he heard that. After thinking about it in his heart, he said seriously, "Don't worry, Professor Qin. If the 4,000 Imperial Army soldiers can't take down this mob in 3 hours, then they won't have the face to continue fighting. Therefore, no matter what, we must return to the foot of the mountain within 4 hours." That's good. Professor Qin stroked his beard and smiled. Dugu Feiying, who was beside him, could not help but ask, since one portion of the antidote can last for 4 hours, then why don't we just let everyone take a few more portions of the antidote? Why do we have to go through so much trouble? This guy's logic does sound reasonable, but I'm afraid he's not wise, mentally retarded. Li Zishuan covered his face. Taking medicine was not as simple as 1 + 1. Haha. General Dugu, the effects of this antidote cannot be stacked. If we use it now, we must wait for another 24 hours before we can take it again. Therefore, your suggestion just now is not feasible. Chapter 500. Haha. Is that so? Forget it then. Big brother, lead everyone and start attacking the mountain. Yes, hurry up and attack the mountain. Don't waste time. Dugu Feiying scratched his head awkwardly and said. Although he was trying to cover it up, the second half of what he said still made sense. Li Zishuan agreed. Feiying is right. Xin, let's attack the mountain quickly. Let's take down Snake Spirit Mountain before the sky turns dark. Dugu Xion's mouth twitched. Xin, my foot. However, when faced with such a shameless fellow, even if he wanted to object to this name, it was still ineffective. All right. I'll tell them a few things and start attacking the mountain. Finally, Dugu Xion nodded and walked out of the tent. He began to mobilize the 4,000 Imperial Guards in an unusually simple manner. All right. All in all, you are about to face a group of Jianghu ruffians who don't listen to His Majesty's orders. As the most elite Northern Yamen Imperial Army, if you are defeated, I want to see how you can stay in Chang'an City. So, everyone, be on your guard and take note of any unexpected risks in the mountain. The brave will be rewarded, and the cowards will be punished. Don't let the pugilistic world people look down on the Northern Yamen Imperial Guards. Do you hear me? Li Zishuan, Dugu Feiying, Academician Qin, and Academician Wang chatted for a while in the tent. After leaving the tent, he heard Dugu Xian talking to the soldiers. Roar! I hear you. The Northern Yamen Imperial Guards will never retreat. The Northern Yamen Imperial Guards will never be a laughing stock. The Northern Yamen Imperial Guards will never retreat. The Northern Yamen Imperial Guards will never be a laughing stock. The Northern Yamen Imperial Guards will never retreat. The Northern Yamen Imperial Guards will never be a laughing stock. The response to Dugu Xian was a heart-wrenching roar from the 4,000 soldiers of the Imperial Army. Li Zishuan felt the entire forest tremble. Compared to the army of more than 10,000 people he had brought with him, this army of only 4,000 was clearly more imposing. Just from this aura, one could see that this was a powerful army. Of course, Dugu Xian's ability to motivate the Imperial Army with just a few words was truly commendable. Clang! Dugu Xian unsheathed the sword at his waist and pointed it at the sky. Let's move out. Attack the mountain. Yes. All the soldiers roared in agreement. The group of more than 4,000 people began to move in an orderly manner toward the mountain pass of the Snake Spirit Mountain, not far away. Li Zishuan patted Dabai's head and told it to wait at the foot of the mountain. Then, he picked up the wind-chasing sword and chased after Dugu Xian. He had to participate in this attack, but he wouldn't bring Dabai along. The poison in the Snake Spirit Mountain was a fatal threat to Dabai. After all, the antidote developed by the two doctors from the Imperial Physician Department was only effective on humans. No one knew if it would be effective on horses. Li Zishuan also didn't want to use Dabai as a test subject. In any case, the mountain passes in the Snake Spirit Mountain were rugged, and there were very few places where horses could be used. Moreover, his instincts told him that this attack on the Snake Spirit Mountain would definitely not be a smooth one. On the contrary, it was very likely that there would be great danger. Li Zishuan couldn't explain why he felt that way. If he had to give a reason, it could only be a man's intuition. Ayo! Dabai wanted to chase after its master, who had always been very close to it, when it saw that its master was about to leave. However, it was pulled back by the reins tied to the tree. It anxiously and sadly let out two strange and sorrowful cries in Li Zishuan's direction. Dabai understood human nature. It could feel the heaviness in Li Zishuan's heart, so it was very anxious. Li Zishuan felt a little uncomfortable when he heard that. However, he didn't have any confidence in protecting anyone's life in this mysterious Snake Spirit Mountain, let alone a horse. After all, the cultivation of the sect leader of the Seven Cultivators sect was terrifying. It was comparable to some of the martial uncles in the Celestial Master sect in his memories. The Northern Imperial Army will never retreat. The Northern Imperial Army will never be a laughing stock. On the Snake Spirit Mountain. At this moment, the deafening roars of the Imperial Army could be faintly heard from the foot of the mountain. Batian and the Snake King were both people with profound inner strength. Even though they were in the stone room, they could still hear the faint roars. They are starting to attack the mountain. This army is actually the Northern Imperial Army. Our Seven Cultivators sect's opponent this time is really terrifying. Batian's expression suddenly changed. He clasped his hands behind his back and muttered to himself, "Senior Marshal Brother. So what if it's the Northern Imperial Army? As the saying goes, capture the ringleader to capture the bandit. You are a peak Grandmaster expert. When they are exhausted by the poisonous miasma, ambush, and harassment in the mountain, won't it be fine if you capture Li Zishuan and the Northern Imperial Army's commander?" The Snake King rolled his eyes and smiled sinisterly. Batian didn't buy it. He shook his head and said, "Things aren't as simple as you think. The Northern Imperial Army is the elite of the elite in the Chang, an Imperial Army. Li Shimon's most reliable cavalry was selected from the Northern Imperial Army. It is said that the Northern Imperial Army is not only good at chaotic battles between hundreds of thousands of troops, but also good at coordination. With 500 Northern Imperial Army soldiers, they are not afraid of any Jianghu experts. That includes Grandmasters. Once they attack the mountain, Li Zishuan and the commander of the Northern Yamen Imperial Army will definitely be heavily protected. If I try to capture them and get caught in the formation of the Northern Yamen Imperial Army, I'm afraid I won't be able to get out." Snake King was not as cultured as Batian. He was slightly taken aback as he was slightly intimidated by the might of the Northern Yamen's Imperial Army. After a while, he said, "But Senior Marshal Brother, don't forget that our Snake Spirit Mountain has a poisonous miasma. No matter how strong the Northern Imperial Army is, they will have to lie down after a quarter of an hour, right? At that time, won't we be able to torture Li Zishuan and the Imperial Army's commander however we want to torture them?" Batian wasn't as optimistic as the Snake King. In fact, he hadn't been calm for the past 2 days. At this moment, he could only shake his head and say, Junior Marshal brother, you should recuperate first. I'll go check on the defense of the sect's disciples. The Imperial Court's people are attacking. Smash them. Smash them. At the first checkpoint of the mountain path, the disciples of the Seven Cultivators sect who had been lying in ambush discovered the Imperial Army's invasion. Therefore, they took advantage of the fact that the Imperial Army was only 10 feet away to launch an attack. One after another, huge boulders rolled down from above. The soldiers in the front row who couldn't dodge in time were immediately smashed to the ground. Even the Imperial Army behind them fell backward one after another, just like the dominoes. Bam! 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 At the critical moment, Li Zishuan flew to the front of the group and kicked the rapidly falling boulders to the side. Facing the rolling boulders, Li Zishuan started his fancy football performance. After experiencing the initial chaos, the group quickly calmed down. Seeing that Li Zishuan was having fun, alone in front of the group, they all went up to help him. The first annihilation crisis was instantly resolved. Chapter 501. Smash. Quickly. The soldiers are coming up. Once they come up, we will all be beheaded. Smash as hard as you can. Li Zishuan's eyes were sharp. He saw a middle-sized man in black clothes at the corner of the mountain path ahead. The man was trying his best to urge the disciples of the Seven Cultivators of True Virtue to move the rocks. He seemed to be the leader of the group. Li Zishuan lifted his leg and kicked the rock, hitting the leader's forehead. The leader screamed miserably and rolled down the side of the forest before he could call for help. The mountain path of Snake Spirit Mountain was extremely narrow. If an ambush was arranged in advance at every turn, it would indeed be possible for one man to hold the pass against 10,000 men. This was because although there were many troops attacking the mountain, only one person was allowed to pass at a time. In a team of more than 4,000 people, only one person could fight at a time. It had to be said that Snake King's initial plan was really good. If other troops had encountered such a perfect ambush, they would have suffered heavy losses. However, Li Zishuan's tyrannical strength and explosive power directly destroyed Snake King's plan. Among the more than 4,000 people present, Li Zishuan was the only one who could kick a boulder that weighed several hundred kilograms like a football. This was the effect of an expert in a chaotic battle that could decide the outcome with a single strike. Aya! Second senior brother is dead. Quickly run. 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 At the first corner, the dozen or so disciples of the Seven Cultivators of True Virtue saw that their leader had been beaten down the mountain and began to scatter. In fact, when they saw the powerful army just now, they were already scared. Had it not been for someone watching over them, they would have run away long ago. Now that their leader was dead, how could they not run? After all, since ancient times, the common people didn't fight with the officials. People like Snake King and Batian, who were ruthless enough to go against the Imperial Court, were few and far between. Run. Run. These soldiers aren't afraid of the poison at all. The Seven Cultivators of True Virtue is done for. Let's run. There was a large army blocking the path below, so they definitely wouldn't be able to cross it. Therefore, they could only go to the Seven Cultivators of True Virtue on the mountain path. These people didn't want to go back, so they had no choice but to run toward the forest and cliffs on both sides of the mountain path. Fortunately, this position was not very high from the foot of the mountain. Even if he accidentally fell down, as long as he protected his vital parts, he would not lose his life. Li Zishuan gestured to the Imperial Guards not to pursue these deserters. He was only interested in Snake King and Batian. As for these disciples of the Seven Cultivators of True Virtue, as long as they didn't help the tyrant, Li Zishuan didn't want to make things difficult for them. Keep marching. Dugu Xian furrowed his brows. After seeing that the disciples of the Seven Cultivators of True Virtue had already run away, he waved his hand and gave an order. Yes! The Imperial Army regained their morale and continued to climb the dangerous Snake Spirit Mountain. Sect Leader! Sect Leader! Oh no! Oh no! The first checkpoint has been broken through by the Imperial Court's army. Batian came out of the stone room. Just as he was about to go down the mountain to check on the current situation, he saw a disciple running over while panting. What? How could they be so fast? Weren't there dozens of boulders there? Batian's expression changed greatly. He opened his eyes wide and said in disbelief, "It's true, Sect Leader. Second senior brother was killed on the spot, and the rest of the disciples fled in all directions. The Imperial Court's army is now marching toward the second checkpoint," the messenger disciple said with a sad face. "Humph. This old man will go and take a look myself." Batian flicked his sleeves and walked down the mountain with a cold face. "Hee. You want to use your petty tricks again?" On the mountain path, the army soon arrived at the second turning point. Li Zishuan sneered and started to attack. However, he wasn't fighting alone this time. The Imperial army had experienced the sneak attack at the first checkpoint, and they were already mentally prepared. They cooperated with each other and started to block the rolling boulders. Dugu Xin and Dugu Feiying, the two experts, also copied Li Zishuan's methods and helped to attack the 7 cultivators' sect's disciples at the checkpoint with stones or throwing knives. "Hurry up! Hurry up! We can't let the Imperial Court's army go up the mountain. Ugh! Save me! Fong Gongming! Give me a hand! Hurry up and run! We can't hold on any longer! We can't hold on any longer! Once the Imperial Court's people come up, we will all be beheaded." Accompanied by a burst of crying, begging for mercy, and fleeing, the second checkpoint of the 7 cultivators' sect was quickly broken through. After a short rest, the army set off on their journey again. However, Li Zishuan wasn't happy because of this. He had a strange feeling in his heart. His intuition told him that the attack on the mountain wouldn't go so smoothly. There would definitely be some unexpected dangers later. Haha. Little Xian, what kind of bullshit 7 cultivators sect is this? Aside from Snake King and their sect master, the others aren't that great. Dugu Feiying walked on the mountain path and laughed complacently with his hands on his waist. In the second checkpoint, his throwing knives killed 3 or 4 disciples of the 7 cultivators sect. It could be said that he had made a great contribution. Therefore, he was now looking down on everyone in the world. Feiying, don't be so happy too early. We haven't even reached half of the mountain yet. Snake King and Batian haven't come out yet, so we mustn't lower our guard. No one knew what tricks they were going to play next. This Spirit Snake Mountain is very strange. It's not as simple as you and I think. Li Zishuan patted Dugu Feiying's shoulder and said with a serious face. Dugu Feiying waved his hand and said indifferently, "Haha. Little Xian, you're thinking too much. Snake King and Batian might be good at martial arts, but we have 4,000 Imperial Guards behind us. No matter how good they are, they won't be able to escape from the encirclement of the Imperial Guards. Therefore, this Spirit Snake Mountain is ours for the taking." "You?" Li Zishuan gritted his teeth. "This brat really doesn't listen to anything when he's being cocky. It's really annoying." Cough cough. Feiying, Little Xian is right. When marching to war, we can't be complacent at all times. Otherwise, we'll definitely lose. It's better to be careful in everything. Dugu Xin couldn't stand this idiot of a younger brother anymore and also advised him. Ugh. Dugu Feiying rubbed his nose and nodded. "Okay, big brother, I know. I'll be careful." Perfunctory. Li Zishuan could tell at a glance that his brother was being perfunctory. He turned to Dugu Xin and said, Xin, tell them to be more vigilant. I keep feeling that something is wrong. Our journey has been too smooth. Batian shouldn't have only prepared these tricks for us. Chapter 502. Bastards. A bunch of trash. Such a good location and so many rolling stones, but they couldn't even stop them for an hour. What a bunch of trash! On a boulder above the mountain path, Batian watched the army break through the second line of defense and couldn't help but curse out loud. Sect leader, what should we do? Many of our disciples died at the hands of the 3 leaders in the previous 2 checkpoints. The 3 of them are very accurate with their stones and throwing knives. As soon as our people show their faces, they will attack us. They are about to reach this checkpoint. What should we do? A tall young man beside Batian mustered up his courage and asked. Although Batian's arrival calmed him down a little, he still couldn't help but feel nervous in the face of such a strong army. Humph! Lu Duong, I'm here. What are you afraid of? Batian snorted in dissatisfaction. Then, he frowned as if he suddenly thought of something and asked, That's not right. Why aren't these people poisoned yet? It hasn't been an hour since they entered the mountain, but it should be at least half an hour, right? No matter how strong their Nigong is, they should be lying on the ground now. This sect leader, I don't know either. But could they have gotten our sect's poison prevention pill or the formula of the poison prevention pill from Lu Baodan? The man named Lu Duong frowned and thought for a while before guessing. That's impossible. Batian denied. The formula of the poison prevention pill is the sect's top secret. Lu Baodan is just a cook. How could she know about it? Also, the sect gives out the poison prevention pill once every 7 days. Even if Lu Baodan has her own collection, it's impossible for her to give out so many poison prevention pills to a 4,000-strong army. Huh? It seems like the people from the imperial court have found a way to break the poison barrier? Lu Duong panicked and didn't know what to do. I'm afraid it's just as you said. Looks like we can't rely on the imperial court to stall for time. We have to end this quickly. De Wang, tell them to hide behind the rolling stones and not show their heads when they throw them. Then, go to the 4th checkpoint and ask Su Qingfeng to bring a group of people and bring over the good gift that I have carefully prepared for the imperial army. Batian's eyes flashed fiercely as he ordered in a deep voice. Lu Duong didn't ask what Batian's great gift was. Instead, he cupped his hands and replied, Yes, sect leader. With that, he turned around and went to make the arrangements. Batian stood where he was and looked at the approaching imperial army. He muttered to himself, This is not the only trick I have up my sleeve. Li Zishuan, Dugu Xian, since you didn't give this old man face earlier, don't blame this old man for being impolite now. Hee. Little Xian, look. The previous checkpoint was also a rolling stone. Didn't I say that old man Batian had run out of tricks? No matter how you play, you only know this one move. Haha. Good timing. My mystic leaf flying dagger can't wait any longer. On the mountain path, Dugu Feiying couldn't help but tug at Li Zishuan's arm and laugh when he saw the huge stones in front of them. Li Zishuan saw the huge stones before Dugu Feiying did. He couldn't help but frown. But I still feel that something is wrong. Feiying, be careful. Swoosh. Splat. Smack. When Dugu Feiying heard Li Zishuan's sudden shout, he couldn't help but be puzzled. Who knew that as soon as Li Zishuan's voice fell, he saw a cold light. With a swish sound, a cloud of blood blossomed in the air, and then his face was tragically sprayed with blood. At the same time, a green flower snake that was cut in 2 fell to the ground with a paw sound. Li Zishuan was talking when he saw a snake on a tree beside Dugu Feiying. It was sticking out its tongue as it approached Dugu Feiying. It seemed like it wanted to kiss Dugu Feiying. So, in a moment of desperation, he used his wind-chasing sword as a flying dagger and cut the snake in half. Damn! Snake? It's a snake. Little Xian, hurry up and take it away. This is so scary. Dugu Feiying was stunned for a few seconds before he regained his senses. But when he took a closer look, he was scared out of his wits. He quickly jumped to the side and shouted. He was just short of crying for his parents. Li Zixuan couldn't help but laugh. Haha. I didn't expect Fei Ying to be so scared at your age. I've been bitten by a snake. Help. I've been bitten too. So many snakes. Oh my god. There are so many snakes. Help, I've been bitten too. Before Li Zixuan could finish speaking, he heard cries for help rising and falling from the ranks of the Imperial Army. He looked around and immediately saw countless small unknown snakes that were joining in the fun in the crowd. Li Zixuan raised an eyebrow and channeled his qi into his voice, shouting, "Brother Li, I'm going to kill you." Quiet. Everyone, take out your realgar powder and scatter it as you walk. Yes, sir. After going through the previous 2 checkpoints, the Imperial Army had a better understanding of Li Zixuan's martial arts realm. People with strength would be respected wherever they went. Therefore, Li Zixuan's words were quite effective. All the soldiers hurriedly took out a large bag of realgar powder from their bags and followed Li Zixuan's instructions, scattering the realgar powder as they walked. Hiss! 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 Finally, a bizarre scene appeared. When Li Zixuan saw the realgar powder, he thought that the snake army would retreat immediately. Who knew that at this moment, a strange and melodious tune could be heard. The snakes paused for a moment on the road. Then, not only did they not retreat, but they immediately rushed toward the army as if they had changed into another person. Oh no, it should be that they had changed into another snake. They rushed toward the army and quickly approached them. Li Zixuan's expression changed and he knew something was wrong. As mentioned earlier, realgar wine and realgar powder had a certain repelling effect on snake. When snakes encountered these 2 things, they would choose to avoid them if they had other choices. Now, there should be someone controlling these snakes. Otherwise, these snakes wouldn't be able to endure their fear of realgar powder and attack the army. Not good. Everyone, stop moving forward. 5 people form a team and help each other look behind. Kill snakes if you see them. Don't get bitten by these poisonous snakes. Li Zixuan made a hand gesture and the army immediately stopped moving forward. He ordered the army behind him as he killed the poisonous snakes around him. Chapter 503. Snake Spirit Mountain. Halfway up the mountain, tens of thousands of venomous snakes, under the control of that strange tune, charged fearlessly at the 4,000 Imperial Army soldiers. Although many of the snakes couldn't break through the swords of the Imperial Army soldiers, and many of them couldn't even touch the sleeves of the soldiers before they were cut into pieces, they still didn't know what fear was and continued to charge at the Imperial Army soldiers. Just thinking about the scene of tens of thousands of venomous snakes in one place made one's scalp tingle. Although the Imperial Army soldiers were elite soldiers who had experienced hundreds of battles, the ones they had fought before were living humans and not these densely packed venomous creatures. Why can't these venomous snakes be killed? My arms are sore from cutting them. F***ck. How dare you bite me, I'll chop you up. Help! I've been poisoned. I've been bitten too. The 4,000 Imperial Army soldiers obeyed Li Zixuan's orders and formed small groups of 5. They formed a circle with their backs against each other to resist the attacks of the venomous snake army. However, the venomous snakes in front of them seemed to be endless. After killing one, 4 or 5 more would come. As time passed, the entire mountain was filled with venomous snake. The stamina of the Imperial Army soldiers was rapidly depleted by the venomous snakes' attack. More and more soldiers were bitten by the venomous snakes, but the attacks of the venomous snakes didn't weaken at all. Xiaoxian, we have to think of something. We can't go on like this. Who knows how many snakes there are on this Snake Spirit Mountain? Dugu Feiying used his sword to parry the venomous snakes around him as he spoke to Li Zixuan at the top of his voice. This unlucky child was only good at throwing knives, but his other abilities were mediocre. However, he couldn't possibly use his throwing knives to kill the snakes, right? In this endless sea of snakes, Even if he carried a sack of throwing knives, it wouldn't be enough to kill them all. This fellow clearly knew this as well. He had gotten a sword from somewhere and was now completely relying on his speed and strength as a middle-stage chi-forming cultivator to fend off the venomous snakes from all directions. However, this kind of method of wielding the sword without any technique also caused his vital energy to be depleted very quickly. In less than 15 minutes, he was already panting. Indeed, we have to think of something. Although these poisonous snakes were annoying, they posed no threat to Li Zixuan, who had entered the Master Realm. They didn't even consume much of his genuine qi. Firstly, his current realm was too high. Secondly, his Taiji swordsmanship could both attack and defend. Its moves were exquisite, and it didn't consume much genuine qi. Although the snakes could not threaten Li Zixuan had to consider the bigger picture. If he allowed the situation to continue, the army would suffer heavy losses. Li Zixuan looked around and finally fixed his gaze on Yin Batian, who was playing the sun on a boulder not far away. The reason why he could recognize that the oval-shaped object in Yin Batian's hand was because he had seen pictures of it on the internet in his previous life. However, today was the first time he had seen someone play a tune on an sun. Suns were made of clay, so it was very difficult to play a tune on them. Xian, Feiying, these snakes were all attracted by Yin Batian. The three of us should work together to kill him. Otherwise, there will be more and more snakes. In the end, these 4,000 people will either be poisoned to death or die of exhaustion. Li Zixuan said to Dugu Xian and Dugu Feiying after using White Tiger's Tail and Sweeping Wind Plum Blossom to kill all the venomous snakes within 3 feet of him. F***CK. Is this what you've come up with? Dugu Feiying almost vomited blood when he heard this. Yin Batian was at the peak of the Master Realm. The three of them were like small shrimps in front of him. How could they possibly defeat him with such a huge difference in realm? What? Isn't Yin Batian at the peak of the Master Realm? He's not even a Grandmaster. Feiying, why are you so afraid? The three of us dared to fight the Snake King, who was at the middle stage of the Master Realm. Now that I'm at the Master Realm and have the help of the Imperial Army, we might have a chance. Li Zixuan understood what Dugu Feiying was thinking. In fact, he didn't expect that the siege of the 7 cultivators sect would turn into a battle between 2 kings. He had the Imperial Army behind him, so he would be crazy to fight Yin Batian. However, now that things had developed to this point, he wouldn't be at ease for the rest of his life if he didn't stand up. However, if they cooperated well in this battle, there was still a chance for them to win. Who's afraid? Let's do it, I'm not afraid. Dugu Feiying straightened his neck and quibbled. Then, he looked at Dugu Xian and asked, Big brother, what do you think? Are you going to do it or not? Although Dugu Feiying didn't show any fear on his face, he was feeling guilty. After thinking about it, he could only seek comfort from his elder brother. Dugu Xian frowned. In the end, he was a general, and it was his duty to lead the army to war. He didn't like this kind of Jianghu struggle and trying to be a hero. Last time, he was forced to fight the Flying Snake King because of the situation. But this time, if he didn't take action, the 4,000 Imperial Army soldiers would probably be in big trouble. Let's do it. Dugu Xian's words were always concise and to the point. However, for such an ambiguous word to come out of the mouth of a cold-faced general, it sounded weird no matter how one listened to it. In any case, Li Zixuan almost laughed out loud. Dugu Feiying opened his mouth. Since his brother also supported Li Zixuan's king versus king plan, what else could he say? He could only follow along. Ha. Good. Today we'll fight side by side again. So what if he's at the peak of the Master Realm? Beat his mother. What's there to be afraid of? When Li Zixuan saw Dugu Xian and Dugu Feiying come over and stand by his side, he could not help but recall the scene of the three of them beating up the flying serpent. He immediately became filled with pride and could not help but laugh at the sky. Bah! You're right. Isn't it just peak Grandmaster? What's there to be afraid of? Don't be afraid, just do it. Dugu Feiying was at the prime of his youth. After being provoked, he was also a little hot-blooded. He spat at Yin Baishan's direction and said arrogantly, "Cut the crap, if you want to fight then fight." Dugu Xian raised his sword and said unhappily, "Okay, let's fight our way out first." Li Zishuan wiped his nose, raised his chasing wind sword, and charged in Yin Baishan's direction. Yin Batian was old and shrewd. He knew that he should not be distracted when he was controlling the snakes, so he was now more than a mile away from the battlefield. As for how his snort could be heard from such a distance, there was no doubt at all. As a martial arts master at the peak of the Grand Master realm, he had the ability to let the entire Snake Spirit Mountain hear his voice. Swords were drawn, and the battle of king versus king was about to start. Chapter 504. Kiki, Juniors, you have the guts to challenge this old man. You are courageous, but you will pay with your lives. On top of a boulder on the mountain path, Yin Batian looked at Li Zishuan, Dugu Feiying, and Dugu Xian, who were charging towards him from the sea of snakes. If Li Zishuan and the others had stayed with the Imperial Army, Yin Batian wouldn't have been able to do anything to them. After all, no Jianghu expert would dare to go against the Imperial Army. But now that Li Zishuan, Dugu Feiying, and the others had left the army and were going to have a king versus king battle with him, Yin Batian was very happy. In the end, the reason why he brought these snakes to the battle was because the 7 Cultivators sect had too few disciples. There were less than 100 of them, and they wouldn't be able to defeat them in a head-on battle. Moreover, it would be too dangerous to capture their leader. After all, the elite Imperial Army wasn't afraid of any Jianghu expert. Now that Li Zishuan and the others had delivered themselves to his doorstep, it was exactly what Yin Batian wanted. Although fighting with Li Zishuan and the others would affect his control over the snakes, there were already so many snakes on the mountain path that they could at least buy some time. As long as he could defeat Li Zishuan and Dugu Feiying before the Imperial Army got rid of the snakes, the crisis of the 7 Cultivators sect would be resolved in an instant. The victor is yet to be decided. Yin Batian, this Duke will ask you one last time. Are you really not willing to hand over the Snake King? Li Zishuan, Dugu Feiying, and Dugu Xian jumped onto the platform opposite of Yin Batian and said coldly. He wasn't talking nonsense before the battle. He was also trying to buy time for the Imperial Army to get rid of the snakes. His 5 senses were sharp, and he had already noticed that the snakes on the mountain paused for a moment when Yin Batian was talking to them. This meant that Yin Baishan's control over the snakes had a time limit. As long as he could buy some time, the snakes would definitely be able to break free from Yin Baishan's control. Duke Li, you're doomed to waste your efforts. 15 minutes is more than enough to get rid of the 3 of you. Yin Batian smiled indifferently. Although he was well aware of Li Zishuan's intention of stalling for time, he didn't care at all. He slowly put away the sun, drew out the long sword at his waist, and pointed it at Li Zishuan and the other 2. Haha! I remember that the Snake King said something similar a month ago, but I'm sorry to disappoint you. I'm still alive and well, but the Snake King has become an earthworm that doesn't even dare to step out of his house. Li Zishuan retorted without fear. Ha ha ha! That's right. What bullshit, Snake King. His name is quite impressive, and he is also a master at the Grand Master middle stage. When he saw me, a junior at the Qi middle stage, didn't he run away? Ha ha ha! It was unknown whether it was intentional or not, but Dugu Feiying, who was watching from the side, didn't mind the commotion and added fuel to the fire. This guy was laughing with his hands on his waist. Coupled with what he said just now, if the Snake King were here, he would definitely be pissed to death. Yin Batian was very close to the Snake King, and he was also very angry. A trace of anger finally appeared on his indifferent face. He waved his sword and snorted coldly. "Junior, you're courting death." As soon as he finished speaking, Batian disappeared with his sword. Li Zishuan's pupils shrank and he shouted, "Fei Ying, get out of the way!" Boom! As soon as Batian finished speaking, Dugu Fei Ying realized that he was in great danger. He felt as if he was being stared at by a ferocious beast, and his entire body was filled with an extremely cold, murderous intent. He couldn't even move if he wanted to. Li Zishuan's shout seemed to have some kind of magical power that warmed up his cold inner breath slightly. Only then did he have the ability to move. The moment he turned his body, he felt a long sword as cold as water slashing down on the hair on his face. Dugu Fei Ying was so scared that he immediately used all his inner force to jump to the side. The place where he was just standing was instantly blasted into a big pit. How terrifying! The power of a peak Grand Master was indeed terrifying. The dust settled. Li Zishuan, Dugu Xian, and Dugu Fei Ying all had the same thought. As the person involved, Dugu Fei Ying was undoubtedly the one who felt it the most. At this moment, he felt so bitter in his heart. He regretted agreeing to Li Zishuan to come over and cause trouble. They weren't causing trouble, they were risking their lives. When Batian disappeared from the spot earlier, only Li Zishuan among the three of them saw his footwork in the air. Dugu Xian and Dugu Fei Ying could only see a series of afterimages. Almost in the blink of an eye, Batian flew down from above Dugu Fei Ying's head. Batian's furious attack was obviously more powerful and aggressive than the one he used to test Li Zishuan at the foot of the mountain yesterday. If there were no accidents, this sword would definitely pierce through Dugu Fei Ying's body from the top of his head, and Dugu Fei Ying would definitely die. Unfortunately, there were many accidents in reality, and Dugu Fei Ying was still alive and well. Batian's sure kill attack missed. Heh! I've underestimated you juniors. To think that there are actually people who can survive my Qiankuan sword. I'd like to see how long a sharp-tongued brat like you can live. Batian was slightly surprised, and without saying anything, he raised his sword and continued to attack Dugu Fei Ying. As for Li Zishuan and Dugu Xian, Batian couldn't be bothered with them. He only wanted to take care of Dugu Fei Ying first before thinking about anything else. This was the best thing about our Dugu Fei Ying. Once in a battle, he would definitely pull the enemy's aggro to the max, and give his teammates a lot of room to attack. But this was also the most tragic thing about Dugu Fei Ying. Because he attracted too much aggro, he was going to be tortured. And he wasn't a big meat shield like Qing Yaojin or Yuqigong. He was still a pretty boy. How could he accept Batian's cruel torture? F***ck. Old bastard, you're still not done playing? You think I'm easy to bully? Then I'll let you have a taste of my power. When Dugu Fei Ying saw that Batian was still going to attack, he couldn't help but scream. He jumped far away, and then took out dozens of flying knives from his pants and threw them all at Batian as if they were free. Dozens of flying knives flew towards Batian. Li Zishuan, who was about to help Dugu Fei Ying block the attack, couldn't help but have his eyes lit up. Dugu Fei Ying's flying knives had improved a lot compared to when he was fighting Flying Snake. Not to mention other things, even if Flying Snake could block this rain of flying knives, it wouldn't be easy for him. This was enough to explain the problem. Although their opponents were more than one level stronger than Flying Snake, the three of them had also improved, and they might not lose this battle. Chapter 505. Bam! 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 With the sound of swords clashing against each other, Batian managed to nullify Dugu Fei Ying's extraordinary move with just a few slashes. Even so, the three of them didn't look disappointed. They knew that even if Dugu Fei Ying had improved a lot, he wouldn't be able to injure Batian with his flying daggers. They were already satisfied that they were able to hold Batian back for a few seconds with their flying daggers. In a fight between experts, life and death was decided in a second. Even though it wasn't as exaggerated as they said, the time that Dugu Feiying had bought was enough for Li Zixuan and Dugu Xian to do a lot of things. 9 Taishan swords, first style, ride the wind. Riding the wind to the 9 heavens. At this crucial moment to save Dugu Feiying, Li Zixuan did not plan to use the Taiji sword technique. He wanted to use his best, fiercest, and fastest sword move without holding back. Only then could he save Dugu Feiying. Otherwise, this pretty boy wouldn't be able to survive for more than 2 seconds under Yin Beishan's attack. Lone Wind swordplay. Almost at the same time, Dugu Xian chanted and dashed towards Yin Batian with his sword. The sword moved, and the shadow of the sword followed. Dugu Xian leaped into the air and spun in the air. A blinding sword aura shot up like a dazzling silver dragon. Li Zixuan could feel the sharpness around Dugu Xian even from afar. He couldn't help but be shocked. Compared to Dugu Feiying, Dugu Xian had improved a lot after that battle. His battle prowess had also increased a lot. This sword strike already had the aura of a grandmaster expert. Being targeted by 2 sharp sword intents at the same time, Yin Beishan's heart skipped a beat. He had no choice but to give up on his plan to kill Dugu Feiying. He could only use his sword to block the attack. His long red hair fluttered in the air and his eyes were cold. His sword was like a rainbow and his footwork changed. First, he used a simple lift of his sword to deflect Li Zixuan's ride the wind. Then, he appeared in front of Dugu Xian. He waved his sword lightly, and Dugu Xian was sent flying by a huge force. Blood flowed out of his mouth. He was relaxed and indifferent to the extreme. Yin Batian had crushed Li Zixuan and Dugu Xian with his superior cultivation level and unparalleled movement technique. Before Li Zixuan and Dugu Xian's swords converged, he attacked them separately. First, he pushed back Li Zixuan and then injured Dugu Xian. Furthermore, he looked relaxed as if it was as easy as blowing away dust. It was obvious that there was a huge gap between their strength. Swish, swish, swish. How could Dugu Feiying be missing at this time? Although he regretted falling for Li Zixuan's trick, he couldn't abandon his brother and leave alone. The only choice left for him was to fight to the death. While Yin Batian was busy fighting Li Zixuan and Dugu Xian, he channeled his qi into his palm and infused it into the flying daggers that had accompanied him day and night. He could even feel the resonance of blood being thicker than water, as if the flying daggers were a part of his body. Then, he stared intently at Yin Beishan's body. When Yin Batian retreated, Dugu Feiying made his move decisively. 3 Xian leaf flying daggers flew towards Yin Beishan's path in a triangular formation, emitting a blazing light. Dugu Feiying felt that these 3 flying daggers were the most exciting, most accurate, and most powerful flying daggers he had ever used in his life. Of course, these 3 flying daggers were also the most powerful enemies he had ever faced in his life. This was the sound of a flying dagger piercing into flesh. Yin Batian was a martial arts expert at the peak of the Grandmaster realm. His 5 senses were extremely sharp. Of course, he could feel the hot knife qi behind him. However, his entire body was already in a position to retreat. Even if he forcefully changed his direction midway, he would not be able to completely dodge Dugu Feiying's 3 carefully calculated flying knives. One of the mystic leaf flying daggers sliced open a wound on Yin Beishan's left arm like tofu. If it weren't for his strong inner qi and quick reflexes that allowed him to focus his true qi on the wound at the critical moment, this flying dagger would have sunk into his arm. The battlefield fell into an eerie silence. No one would have thought that the weakest of the 3, Dugu Feiying, would be able to injure Yin Batian, a peak grandmaster. Dugu Feiying's 3 flying daggers were perfectly executed because Li Zixuan and Dugu Xian had created a very good opportunity for him to attack. However, To be able to grasp the opportunity so well was enough to prove that Dugu Feiying's current ability was much, much better than before. This brat has suddenly exploded with power. He's now famous for injuring a peak grandmaster when he's at the chi cultivating stage. Li Zixuan smiled as he looked at Dugu Feiying, who was still in a daze. Ah, you little bastard! I'm going to cut you into pieces! Yin Batian pulled out the flying dagger from his arm and threw it on the ground. Then, he screamed at Dugu Feiying furiously. Humiliation! He was a master at the peak of the Grandmaster realm, but he was injured by a junior at the middle stage of Qi transformation. If he didn't kill Dugu Feiying today, he would become the laughing stock of the entire Jianghu. F***ck. Don't you call me that, you old bastard. If other people hear you, they'll think that I'm related to you. I'm your grandpa. If you call me that again, I'll stab you again. Dugu Feiying had been calling Yin Batian an old bastard. Now that Yin Batian called him a little bastard, he couldn't take it anymore. An old bastard and a little bastard. If other people didn't know their relationship, they would think that they were father and son. That was why Dugu Feiying cursed in exasperation. Pfft! Li Zixuan, who was preparing the second sword technique of the 9 Taishin swords, couldn't help but laugh when he heard that. He didn't expect Dugu Feiying, this unlucky kid, to be such a prankster. He didn't forget to be funny even in a life-and-death situation. Because of that, more than half of the sword technique that he was preparing dissipated. Wah wah wah! You little bastard, you're too much! Yin Batian had been high and mighty for decades. When had he ever been humiliated like this? It was already a miracle that he didn't vomit blood on the spot. Even so, he still felt a ball of fire rising up his head. He picked up his sword and flew toward where Dugu Feiying was standing without a care. F***ck. Unfilial grandson, how dare you kill your grandpa? I'm going to kill you. Don't. Grandpa, you're my grandpa. I'm sorry. F***ck, big brother, Xiao Xian, I'm going to die if you don't come and save me. How could Dugu Feiying bear the anger of a master at the peak of the supreme power realm? In less than 2 seconds there were 4 or 5 sword wounds on his body. He hurriedly asked Li Zixuan and Dugu Xian for help. Chapter 506. 9 Taishin Swords, Second Style, Graceful. Li Zixuan wasn't discouraged at all after his first attack was easily deflected by Yin Batian. After he steadied himself, he followed up with the second style of 9 Taishin sword. The sword in Li Zixuan's hand moved even faster, its trajectory like a flying dragon soaring in the sky. Carrying the remaining power of the first sword, riding the wind, its trajectory was like a flying dragon soaring in the sky, erratic. On the other side, Dugu Xian's sword became even sharper. He flew up into the sky and started the second wave of attacks with Li Zixuan. Yin Batian didn't care at all. He just wanted to kill Dugu Feiying first. He was very, very angry today. He didn't know how many years it had been since he was this angry. F***ck. Old bastard, are you done yet? You're forcing me to do this. I'm going to use my ultimate move. Dugu Feiying staggered 2 steps and waved his hand, indicating for Yin Batian to stop first. Then, he said in a serious tone. While he was talking, he was also putting on a posture. It really looked like he was serious. Actually, he knew that he was just an empty shell now. Although only a few breaths of time had passed, the true qi in his body had been exhausted. There was no doubt that if he did not use up all of his true qi when Yin Batian attacked just now, there was a 10,000% chance that he would be dead by now. At that time, neither Li Zixuan nor Dugu Xian could save him because they couldn't make it in time. He could only rely on himself. That was why, even though he looked like he was in a sorry state, it wasn't easy for him to survive. No one in the Qi-forming realm could do better than him. You're asking for it. Dugu Feiying's acting was so good that Batian didn't know if it was real or fake. However, Batian didn't believe that Dugu Feiying would be able to throw out 3 flying knives that could threaten a master like before. He didn't want to give Dugu Feiying another chance. He wanted to kill Dugu Feiying before Li Zixuan and Dugu Xian's sword arrived. He was confident that he was faster than Li Zixuan and the others. At this moment, Baishan's mind was clouded by anger. He originally had the absolute advantage. As long as he fought steadily, he had a 90% chance of killing Li Zixuan, Dugu Feiying, and Dugu Xian. But now, he had to take the risk of being injured by Li Zixuan and Dugu Xian in order to assassinate Dugu Feiying. It was unbelievable. It had to be said that anger could really blind a person's eyes and make them lose their rationality. However, Baishan's plan wasn't entirely wrong. Under normal circumstances, Li Zixuan and Dugu Xian wouldn't have been able to come to Dugu Feiying's aid before Batian killed him. Of course, that was under normal circumstances. Unfortunately, our main character, Li Zixuan, was not a normal person from beginning to end. Nonsense, can a normal person be as evil as him? He practiced both martial arts and literature, and he was the most powerful person among his peers. Li Zixuan was 10 feet away from Batian, and Batian was 6 feet away from Dugu Feiying. No matter how he calculated, Li Zixuan would never be able to catch up to Batian. At this moment, Li Zixuan's mind was unusually calm. In an instant, he relied on his immense spiritual energy to come up with at least 100 plans. After analyzing and comparing, he finally came up with the most optimal and most likely plan to save Dugu Feiying. 9 Taishan swords, 3rd style, Snow Walk. Snow Walk without a trace, swift as a swallow. 9 Taishan swords, 4th style, Wave Breaker. Wave Breaker, Sea Lord, Thunder Fury. 9 Taishan swords, 5th style, Dust Parting. A sword parting the dust parting. Li Zixuan used the remaining power of the 2nd style of 9 Taishan swords to consecutively use the 3rd, 4th, and 5th styles in less than a breath's time. He didn't want to kill anyone, but because he changed his moves too quickly. He couldn't hit anyone at all, and all of them hit the air. The reason why he did this was because he wanted to take advantage of the situation. 9 Taishan swords was a supreme sword technique derived from Li Zixuan's internal energy. When he used it, the 9 styles were linked together, and it was like a storm. It was continuous and overwhelming. Moreover, the power of each style would stack with the power of the next style. Correspondingly, the speed of the sword style would also stack. Li Zixuan planned to use this method of stacking sword styles to catch up with Baishan's speed. This was the most feasible plan that he came up with after using his immense spiritual energy to deduce countless times. After the 5th style of 9 Taishan swords was used, the tip of the chasing wind sword shone with a cold light. An extremely cold sword intent instantly locked onto Baishan's body. This sword was really a dust parting. Li Zixuan's speed had already exceeded his limit. Because of this extreme speed, his long hair was pulled back like a steel wire on this windless mountain path. After entering the Grandmaster realm, Li Zixuan's 5 swords were now at least twice as powerful as the 5 swords he used to fight against the devils incarnate in the Qing mansion. 9 Taishan swords was able to surpass the level of the enemy. That was why he was able to fight Qing Yaojin to a standstill when he was only at the peak of Qi refining stage. Although Qing Yaojin went easy on him, in terms of moves, he wasn't inferior to Qing Yaojin. Now that he was able to use 5 swords in a row as a Grandmaster, judging from the power of the 5th style, Dust Parting, he indeed had the ability to threaten a Grandmaster peak expert. Not enough, still not enough. Li Zixuan did a rough calculation and felt that his current speed was still not enough. Therefore, he continued to change his move. The 6th style of 9 Taishan swords, drifting cloud. Smoke parting, drifting cloud, never return. Li Zixuan's speed had already reached the extreme, but now it was 40% faster. At this moment, he and his sword were like smoke and drifting cloud, never to return. Others couldn't even see his real body. This was the first time Li Zixuan used the 6th style of 9 Taishan swords in a real battle. Since he entered the Grandmaster realm after fighting with the Flying Snake last month, he had practiced this sword style at least 100 times at home. Now, he couldn't say that he had mastered it thoroughly, but he had some small achievements. Moreover, with the power of the 5 swords in a row just now, the 6th style at this moment was like a sword that didn't belong to the human world. Its speed was even faster than Batian. On the other hand, Dugu Xin was not idle. When Li Zixuan used the 4th style of 9 Taishan swords, he had already seen through Li Zixuan's intention. After all, his martial arts talent was one of the best among the younger generation. Moreover, the person who was in danger was his brother. Logically speaking, he should be more anxious than Li Zixuan. After seeing through Li Zixuan's intention, Dugu Xin jumped up and used a series of complicated sword moves. Then, his speed increased by 60%. Although he was not as fast as Li Zixuan, he was not far behind. The two of them, one in front and one behind, stabbed their swords at Batian's back. Chapter 507. This is bad. When Batian's sword was less than 3 inches away from Dugu Feiying's throat, he suddenly felt 2 murderous intents coming from behind him. He felt a sense of danger. But at this moment, even if he turned around, he wasn't confident that he could block these 2 killer moves. However, he had no choice but to turn around. He didn't want to die together with Dugu Feiying. During this moment of hesitation, Li Zixuan's sword got closer to Batian's heart. Although Batian's martial arts realm was higher than Flying Snake's, his ability to make decisions on the spot was not as good as Flying Snake's. Chi! Pft! Pft! In a moment of desperation, Batian had no choice but to give up on Dugu Feiying. He quickly turned his body and tried to use his sword to parry Li Zixuan's chasing wind sword. The 2 swords clashed and a chi sound was heard. Batian's hasty attack was ultimately unable to defeat Li Zixuan's flowing cloud, the 6th sword of the 9 Taishan swords that he had been accumulating for a long time. The wind-chasing sword easily cut open a wound below Batian's right rib, and the sword sank into Batian's body due to inertia. Dugu Xin also took the opportunity to stab his sword into Batian's left rib. However, Batian had time to block the attack, so Dugu Xin's sword didn't go in too deep. Ah! Shameless brat, how dare you sneak attack me! Batian roared and released his true chi at the peak of the Grandmaster realm, sending Li Zixuan and Dugu Xin flying far away with their swords. Dugu Feiying also took the opportunity to crawl to Li Zixuan's side. He had just survived a disaster. At this moment, this guy's heart couldn't help but thump, thump, thump. He thought he was going to die just now because Li Zixuan and Dugu Xin were still far away from him. Now that he found out that he was still alive, he had to cherish this hard-won chance of survival. Dugu Feiying swore in his heart that he would never do this kind of work again, even if he was beaten to death. Damn it! As soon as Batian finished speaking, he flew over with his sword in hand. The 2 wounds on his body were dripping with blood, making him look extremely horrifying. Of course, the expression on his face was even more horrifying. This old man probably hadn't been injured for more than 10 years, and now he was so angry? That's right, Batian was furious. At this time, he threw out all of his sword moves as if they were free. It looked like he wanted to quickly cut down the 3 little trash fish in front of him. At this moment, of course, Li Zixuan would not be so stupid as to fight head-on with a master at the peak of the supreme power realm who was in a berserk state. He stood in the middle of the three people, combined with the analysis of his powerful spiritual force, and used the full defense version of the Taiji sword to bear and resolve a large number of attacks for the whole team. Bang! 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 Just when Batian was about to attack again, the sound of hundreds of people running together suddenly came from the mountain path, and the sound was getting closer and closer. Batian took a closer look and saw that it was a team of 100 Imperial Guards. How can they be so fast? Batian was not the only one who thought so. Li Zixuan, Dugu Xian, and Dugu Feiying all had the same thought. Although the three of them wanted the Imperial Guards to leave the snake swarm and come to save them, they never thought that the Imperial Guards would come so quickly. In fact, when Batian was hit by Dugu Feiying's flying dagger, the connection between him and the snake swarm immediately weakened by 30%. Later, when Li Zixuan and Dugu Xian suddenly attacked him, Batian suffered even more serious injuries, and he instantly lost all connection with the snake swarm. As a matter of fact, the Imperial Guards closest to them took the opportunity to rush over. Trying to run? It's not that easy. Li Zixuan sensed that Batian was quietly retreating. He laughed coldly and appeared in front of Batian. He was going to take the initiative to attack. Rock spreading wings, hugging the moon, Yiksha exploring the sea, wild goose shooting, green dragon showing claws, falling flower, white tiger grabbing the tail, black dragon twisting the pillar, sweeping plum blossom. Last time, when he fought against the flying snake, Li Zixuan had taken 18 offensive sword moves from the 55 Taiji sword forms and used his powerful mind energy to quickly deduce the best combination of offensive sword move. He created a full offensive version of the Yang-style Taiji sword and beat the flying snake until it could not breathe. This time, Li Zixuan did not hesitate to use the full attack version of the Taiji sword against Batian. His goal was to stall Batian and prevent him from escaping. Back then, Snake King had personally told Batian in the secret chamber, "If you meet that Li Zixuan kid, if you can kill him in one move, don't save it for the second move. That kid is evil, and he'll be a disaster if you let him live." At this moment, Batian finally understood Snake King's good intentions. Previously, when he wanted to fight Li Zixuan had created a strange set of sword forms that could always nullify his attack. Now that he did not want to fight anymore and wanted to escape, Li Zixuan had created another set of sword forms that stuck to him like glue. It was really annoying. Dugu Xian and Dugu Feiying were not idiot. They also understood Li Zixuan's intention. One of them held a sword, while the other threw a flying knife from afar. They both joined the battle at the same time. In this short period of time, Dugu Feiying had already recovered 10 to 20% of his inner breath. He could still throw flying knives from afar to harass Batian. Poor Batian, a master at the peak of the Grandmaster realm, was being chased by 3 juniors at a lower level. It was really frustrating. However, there was nothing he could do. He could only defend himself while feeling anxious. The 100 Imperial Guards took advantage of the precious time that Li Zixuan had bought for them to surround Batian. At this point, the situation of a pack of wolves trapping the Lion King was finally formed. The arrogant master at the peak of the Grandmaster realm was now like a hero at the end of his road. He looked at the increasing number of Imperial Guards around him, and his eyes flashed with anger and unwillingness. Seeing this, Li Zixuan quickly retreated from the battle with Dugu Xian. He did not need to personally charge into the battle anymore. The Imperial Guards had a battle formation that was specially designed to deal with the masters of the Jianghu. He only needed to stay outside and hold the line. Batian, you only needed to hand over Snake King, but you insisted on doing things your own way. In the end, you dragged your sect down with you. You're asking for trouble. Since you don't want to hand over Snake King, I have no choice but to wipe out your 7 cultivators of virtue. Li Zixuan calmed his inner breath and said coldly, Now that the situation was settled, he was no longer in a hurry. Bah! The winner takes all. You can kill me or cut me up as you wish, but do you think it's your turn to teach me a lesson? When I was roaming the Jianghu, you were still in your mother's womb. Chapter 508. Humph. You're about to die, yet you still have a sharp tongue. As citizens of the great Tang, the 7 cultivators of virtue disobeyed His Majesty's orders and openly opposed the imperial court's army in broad daylight. This is no different from a rebellion. Soldiers, listen up. Take down this hut. Dugu Xian didn't want to cause any more trouble, so he waved his hand and ordered coldly. At this moment, he was back to being a great general who commanded thousands of soldiers and horses. Yes. The imperial army answered loudly, and hundreds of soldiers formed a Mo saber formation with their Mo sabers and began to attack Batian. Although the imperial army's martial realm was far inferior to Batian's, their seamless cooperation made up for their lack of individual strength. When Batian beat back an imperial army soldier, dozens of Mo sabers would follow behind him. Thus, he didn't dare to go all out and attack anyone. This was the power of a battle formation. Many people scoffed at the use of battle formations, thinking that it was just something made up by novelists and that its use on the battlefield was negligible. Li Zishuan also thought so in the past, but after seeing the imperial army beat up Batian, he didn't think so anymore. In fact, if one didn't have a battle formation, it was no different from being a hooligan. The tactics of ancient armies mainly relied on battle formations. Because communication methods were basically non-existent, sound couldn't travel far, flags couldn't be seen, fireworks and musical instruments were monotonous, and messengers could be killed if they ran too slowly. A mechanized battle formation was the only way to achieve the goal of a general. For soldiers, they just had to remember who was next to them and whether they should stand in a horizontal line or a diagonal line. As for the rest, it was up to the officers. As for the power of military formations, a simple example could be used to illustrate it. According to reliable historical records, Emperor Wu of Song of the southern dynasties led a few hundred soldiers to defeat tens of thousands of peasant soldiers. Many people would think that this was just bragging, but if one understood the true meaning of battle formations, they would know that it wasn't just guns that could be used against the natives. The Art of War recorded the 10 most basic battle formations: square formation, circle formation, sparse formation, number formation, sharp formation, goose formation, hook formation, xian formation, water formation, and fire formation. Some of the messy formations in the later generations were derived from these 10 basic formations. The principle of using formations was to break through the weak points of the opponent's formation and expand the results of the battle after breaking through. Later on, this theory was no longer limited to field battle formations. Eventually, it was promoted to national strategy by Sun Wu. From this, it could be seen that ancient military commanders attached great importance to military formations. In just 15 minutes, Batian's body was covered in a dozen saber wounds. While there were quite a few injured Imperial Army soldiers, there were even more Imperial Army soldiers coming to reinforce him. What made Batian want to curse the most was that while he was fending off the soldiers, he also had to be on guard against the shameless sneak attacks of Li Zishuan, Dugu Xian, and Dugu Fading. Right now, the 3 of them were considered experts in Batian's eyes. They were experts who could threaten his life. The wounds on his body were proof of that. Under the influence of various unfavorable factors, Batian's true qi was being depleted faster and faster. The saber wounds on his body were increasing, and he had entered a vicious cycle. If this continued, he would be hacked to death in less than 15 minutes because of his true qi. After all, even a martial Dao master could not have an endless supply of true qi. Batian, why don't you just surrender? You are also a formidable person. I don't think you want to end up being hacked to death, right? If you surrender, I can leave you with an intact corpse. Li Zishuan's eyes were like torches. He had already seen through the situation on the battlefield. He crossed his arms and looked at Batian coldly. Yes. Batian, if you call me Grandpa, I might be kind enough to give you a quick death. Don't make any more pointless struggles. Ha! Dugu Feiying laughed as he played with the Xian leaf flying dagger in his hand. To him, there was no way he would let go of such an opportunity to beat a drowning dog. Moreover, this was a peak grandmaster. He would be proud to brag about such a drowning dog in front of others. But he had forgotten who was the one who shamelessly called him Grandpa and begged for mercy during the battle. Shameless brat, if I have the chance, I will definitely kill you. New and old grudges surged in his heart. Looking back at the battle just now, Batian realized that he had lost because of Dugu Feiying's foul mouth. That was why he had made several wrong decisions. Therefore, the person Batian hated the most was not Li Zishuan or Dugu Exin. It was definitely Dugu Feiying. He wanted to eat his flesh and drink his blood. Ha ha! Come at me! Come at me if you dare! Unfortunately, you can't hit me. Let me ask you, are you angry? Are you angry? Ha! Dugu Feiying continued to use his foul mouth. But this time, his foul mouth was going to cause trouble again. Sha, sha, sha. Suddenly, a very clear sha, sha, sha sound came from above the mountain path. Li Zishuan and the others looked up in confusion and were shocked. It was a giant python with 7 heads. When it stood up, it was as tall as 4 people. Li Zishuan cursed in his heart. At this moment, he wondered if the world he had transmigrated to was the real world of Tang Dynasty. Why does it feel like a magical world? Even a giant python with 7 heads has appeared. What the hell is going on? Following behind the huge snake was a man with a thin face and snow-white hair. The man snorted and said, "Don't worry. Do you really think that the 7 cultivators of true virtue is a pushover? Flying snake." Li Zishuan's pupils shrank as he suddenly spoke. He recognized the person in front of him at first glance. Although the flying snake was masked when he tried to assassinate him, Li Zishuan still remembered the pair of eyes. Therefore, even though the flying snake had a withered face and snow-white hair, Li Zishuan still recognized him. Although the flying snake didn't have much true qi fluctuations on his body, he looked even more sinister and terrifying when he stood next to the giant 7-headed snake. Mr. Li, you really have good eyesight. You can actually recognize me. The flying snake put his hands behind his back and sneered. Junior Marshal Brother, your hair. The Imperial Army was also frightened by the giant 7-headed snake and stopped attacking. Batian looked at the withered face and snow-white hair of the flying snake and couldn't help but exclaim in shock. It's fine. Senior Marshal Brother, you should heal your wounds first. Next, let these people see the real 7 cultivators of true virtue. Ha! The flying snake waved his hand and laughed maniacally. Chapter 509. The real 7 cultivators of true virtue? On the mountain path, Li Zishuan murmured. Then, a trace of horror flashed through his eyes. He looked at the flying snake and asked in confusion, "Is this the 7 cultivators of true virtue?" When Qin Qiong and Cheng Yaojin came to the Li residence, they told Li Zishuan that there was a rare poisonous snake called the 7 cultivators of true virtue in the Miaojiang region. It had 7 heads and was extremely poisonous. Regardless of whether it was a human or an animal, as long as one of its heads bit someone, they would immediately die. At that time, Qin Qiong guessed that the so-called blood rain of true virtue was related to the 7 cultivators of true virtue. Now that he saw such a huge 7-headed snake and the 7 cultivators of true virtue on the mountain, how could Li Zishuan not know that this huge snake was the 7 cultivators of true virtue that Qin Qiong mentioned? However, he would never have thought that the 7 cultivators of true virtue not only had many heads, but its body was also so huge. It was simply impossible for a human to fight against it. Ha ha! You have good eyesight. This is the guardian beast of our 7 cultivators of true virtue. What do you think? Isn't it very awe-inspiring? Hee hee. Unfortunately, you will all become food in its stomach today. Ha ha! The flying snake looked at Li Zishuan and the others with a trace of ridicule in its eyes. It was like a cat playing with a mouse. It opened its arms and laughed arrogantly. In stark contrast, the imperial army that had been besieged by the snakes had gradually rushed over. When they saw the huge and ferocious serpent of 7 cultivators, although they might have felt fear in their hearts, they did not scatter in all directions. They only clenched the modeo in their hands and quietly stood behind Dugu Exian, waiting for their commander's orders. At this time, the military discipline of the Northern Yamen Imperial Army was reflected. If it were any other army, they would have already fled in all directions after seeing such a terrifying monster. It was really rare for the Imperial Army to be able to overcome the fear in their hearts and not forget military discipline at such a critical time. Humph! Don't flatter yourself. If this 7 cultivators of true virtue was really the guardian beast of your 7 cultivators of true virtue, why didn't you bring it out earlier? You are merely at the middle stage of the Grand Master realm. It is impossible for you to fully control the giant snake of 7th cultivator of true virtue. Now that you're able to bring this snake out, I'm afraid you have to pay a heavy price, right? Li Zishuan frowned and sneered at the flying serpent. Li Zishuan reckoned that in the current world, only his master, spiritual master Spirit Su, would be able to match such a huge 7 virtues serpent. Moreover, the most powerful expert of the 7 cultivators of true virtue, Een Batian, was only at the peak of the Grandmaster realm. Therefore, he didn't believe that the flying serpent would be able to subdue such a ferocious beast. If they had the ability to subdue this snake, the 7 cultivators of true virtue would have become famous in the Wulin world a long time ago. Perhaps they would have even become a giant in Jianghu instead of being a nobody like they were now. Therefore, there must be some unknown story behind this. Moreover, the current flying snake's aura was many times weaker than before. Its hair had turned white and its face was haggard. It was obvious that it had experienced a great change. Sure enough, as soon as the flying serpent heard this, its complexion changed greatly. It glanced coldly at Li Zishuan and said in a sharp voice, "Little bastard, if you hadn't gone too far, how would this old man have invited 7 cultivators of true virtue out? Now that things have come to this, you have to pay the price in blood. Don't even think about leaving." After saying that, he raised his head and shouted, "Poison, poison! Kill them all! Don't leave a single one alive! Today they will all be your food!" Roar! 7 cultivators of true virtue seemed to understand human language. It looked up to the sky and roared excitedly. Its roar resounded through the valley and spread outside at a very fast speed. Everyone in the field felt as if they were facing a ferocious beast. Their eardrums were buzzing due to the roar, and the weaker soldiers were already vomiting blood. After 7 cultivators of true virtue finished roaring, its body wriggled forward. In the blink of an eye, it arrived near the several hundred imperial guards that had besieged Een Batian. Its 3 heads stretched out and opened its bloody mouth at the imperial guards. "Evil creature! How dare you?" Seeing that the dozens of imperial guards were about to fall into the snake's stomach, Li Zishuan, Dugu Exian, and Dugu Feiying used their best moves and attacked the 3 heads of the 7 cultivators of true virtue. Ding, ding, ding! There was no sound of sharp blades piercing into flesh, but the sound of metal colliding could be heard. The heads of the 7 cultivators of true virtue were as hard as metal. "Retreat! Everyone, retreat immediately! Retreat! Everyone, retreat immediately!" First, Li Zishuan shouted at the imperial guards. Then, Dugu Xian's roar could be heard as well. They all understood that if they didn't retreat, all 4,000 of them would die here. Such a huge beast wasn't something that could be resisted by humans. Although the previous attacks of Li Zishuan, Dugu Xian, and Dugu Feiying didn't break through the 7 cultivators of true virtue's defense, they did slightly hinder its attack. When the several hundred Imperial Guards heard the order to retreat, they took the opportunity to run out of the 7 cultivators of true virtue's attack range. Feiying, you and Shaoxian leave first. I'll cover the rear. Dugu Xian, who had just been sent flying after his attack failed, hurriedly roared at the 2 people beside him. Big brother! I'm not leaving! Dugu Feiying said angrily. F***ck. Your F***king Bulsh***t. I, Li Zishuan, will never sacrifice my brothers in exchange for my own survival. Besides, my martial arts are better than yours. It's not your turn to cover the rear. Li Zishuan jumped up from the ground and shouted. Then, he turned to Dugu Feiying and said, Feiying, among the 3 of us, you're the one who consumed the most energy and suffered the most injuries. Take the army and retreat first. Dugu Xian looked at Li Zishuan with a complicated expression. Then, he said, That's right. Feiying, take the Imperial Guards and leave quickly. But, don't be so F***king wishy-washy. At this time, no one will be able to leave. Dugu Feiying wanted to refute, but he was interrupted by Li Zishuan's shout. When Dugu Feiying heard this, he gritted his teeth and no longer hesitated. He jumped on his horse and shouted as he ran, Retreat! Everyone, retreat! The Imperial Guards, who were further away from the battlefield, were silent for a moment. Then, they followed Dugu Feiying and ran down the mountain. In such a short time, the 7 cultivators of true virtue's tail had already swept away a large group of soldiers. When it saw that the army was about to retreat, it hissed and was about to snake its body to chase after its food. Evil creature, your opponent is us. Dugu Xian and Li Zishuan led the remaining 100 or so Imperial Guards and began to attack the 7 cultivators of true virtue's body in an attempt to stop the beast from harming the army. Chapter 510. Roar, roar, roar! Seeing that a group of ants actually dared to block its path, 7th cultivator of true virtue swept its huge tail horizontally. More than 30 Imperial Guards couldn't dodge in time and were sent flying backward while vomiting blood. Li Zishuan and Dugu Xian barely dodged the attack by relying on their realms and agility technique. Facing 7th cultivator of true virtue, they only had the strength to protect themselves. Therefore, while stabilizing their bodies, Li Zishuan shouted to the Imperial Guards around him, You guys retreat first. General Dugu and I can hold on for a while. At present, Batian was seriously injured, and the flying snake seemed to have encountered an inexplicable accident. It probably had less than 10% of its strength left. Therefore, 7th cultivator of true virtue was undoubtedly 7th cultivator of true virtue. Zhao Siwei, take the brothers and retreat first. Li Xianan and I will catch up later. Upon hearing Li Zishuan's words, Dugu Xian furrowed his brows. He had led soldiers for so many years, but he had never encountered a commander who would cut off the path of retreat for his subordinate. He couldn't help but feel a little strange. However, in the current situation, the Imperial Guards were indeed of no use. Thinking of this, he took advantage of the moment when 7th cultivator of true virtue turned around and turned his head to speak to a young general. General, we won't leave. As the general's personal guards, how can we abandon the general and leave alone? General and Lord Zhu leave first, and we will cover the rear. Zhao Siwei said to Dugu Xian, while holding the Modeo and guarding against 7th cultivator of true virtue's movements. Leave? Don't even think about leaving. Poison, poison, kill them quickly. Kill them as well as the group that just escaped. How can a mere ant block your path? Kill them all. At this time, the white-haired flying snake behind them roared with a crazed expression. Roar, roar, roar! Seventh cultivator of true virtue seemed to be able to understand the human language. Its huge tail twisted at an extremely fast speed, bringing about gusts of wind. The fallen leaves in the forest were swept up and fluttered in all directions. At the same time, its 7 heads opened their mouths and flicked their tongues, reaching toward the crowd. Roar, roar, roar! Retreat! Retreat! How could petite humans possibly contend against such a huge vicious beast? Facing the enraged great serpent of 7th cultivator of true virtue, everyone had no choice but to retreat. The soldiers that were too slow were either swept away by the tail of the serpent or unfortunately fell into the belly of the serpent. Most of them were poisoned to death by the poisonous fog that the serpent spat out. The enraged 7th cultivator of true virtue immediately caused the imperial guards to suffer heavy losses. Li Zishuan was also shocked. He hadn't expected that 7th cultivator of true virtue would be so terrifying when he was angry. Roar, roar, roar! 7th cultivator of true virtue didn't give up, and continued to chase after them. Relying on the advantage of its size, it rampaged all the way, trying to crush the group of ants that were blocking its path. This small group of imperial guards was about to be wiped out in an instant. Brothers, set up the Mo sword formation. Cover Lord Zhu and the general's retreat. Zhao Siwei got up from the ground, wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and roared at the imperial army soldier beside him. Yes, cover Lord Zhu and the general's retreat. The remaining imperial guards immediately responded loudly. Although their numbers were small and they were in a bad state, their voices weren't soft at all. Instead, they were full of determination. Zhao Siwei, how dare you disobey the general's orders? Dugu Xian barely managed to stabilize his body under the stormy attacks of 7th cultivator of true virtue. Then, he noticed that the army formation had already taken shape and roared at Zhao Siwei. General, protecting you is the most important responsibility of us 120 brothers. Even if we die, we will protect the general thoroughly. If the general wants to punish us, we won't complain. But please don't disappoint our brothers. General, leave quickly. Zhao Siwei turned his head and roared at Dugu Xian when he saw that the embryonic form of the Mo sword formation had already taken shape. His eyes were red and his armor was in a mess. However, his posture was still tall and straight. Standing on the mountain path filled with flying leaves, he looked like a hero at the end of his road. General, leave quickly. There were less than 70 imperial guards left, and they let out a thunderous roar. As soon as their voices fell, the Mo sword formation that they had formed began to fearlessly charge towards 7th cultivator of true virtue. Zhao Siwei. How could the Mo sword formation formed by only 70 people pose a threat to the berserk 7th cultivator of true virtue? Therefore, Dugu Xian couldn't help but be enraged when he saw this. He roared and raised his sword to chase after them. Wait! At this time, Li Zishuan stopped Dugu Xian. Dugu Xian angrily turned his head and said, Li Zishuan, what do you mean? Why won't you let me go? While he was talking, 7th cultivator of true virtue and the Mo sword formation had already clashed. There was no doubt that the first row of Mo sword soldiers was mercilessly swept away. However, the second row of Mo sword soldiers still rushed forward without fear of death. At this time, they no longer hoped to kill 7th cultivator of true virtue. They only hoped to delay him for a while. It would be even better if they could cut off one of his scales. Pa! Li Zishuan's eyes were red, and 2 drops of tears appeared at the corners of his eyes. He ruthlessly slapped Dugu Xian's face and said in a hoarse voice, Dugu Xian, look carefully for me. Who are they fighting for? Who are they injured for? The strength of seventh cultivator of true virtue in its berserk state is far beyond our imagination. If we don't leave now, these brothers will all die in vain. Let's go. In the future, I, Li Zishuan, will definitely avenge my brothers. Li Zishuan really didn't feel good in his heart. If these guards were fewer in number, stronger in skill, and in better condition, perhaps he could fight Dugu Xian to the death to buy them some time to escape. However, the current situation was that even if the two of them tried their best, they would be thankful if 5 of these guards could escape. This was because their current condition was really bad, and each of them was injured. At this critical moment, Li Zishuan chose to be rational. He couldn't be irrational. If he wasn't rational, these cute soldiers would all die in vain, and he and Dugu Xian would definitely be in danger. The two of them didn't have the strength to fight against such a berserk seventh cultivator of true virtue. Let's go. What are you waiting for? Let's go. Seeing Dugu Xian's sluggish face and unfocused eyes, Li Zishuan roared and dragged him down the Snake Spirit Mountain. Poison, poison! Quickly get rid of these ants in front of us and chase after them to kill them. When the flying snake saw Li Zishuan escaping with Dugu Xian, it couldn't help but become anxious and hurriedly shouted. If it weren't for the fact that it had lost all its strength, it would have chased after them long ago. Roar, roar, roar! Seventh cultivator of true virtue roared 3 times and launched an even more ferocious charge at the Imperial Guards. Chapter 511. Roar, 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 roar! Not only did 7th cultivator of true virtue's roar reverberate throughout Snake Spirit Mountain, but it also traveled further into the distance. Oh, what's that sound? A farmer who was chopping firewood at the edge of Qinling Mountains asked his companion in shock when he heard the faint roar. It sounds like a beast, but I don't think any beast would make such a sound, right? Another middle-aged farmer looked in the direction of the sound and said hesitantly, "Could it be that there are beasts in Qinling Mountains that we don't know about? Woo-woo, big tiger, let's go home. No more chopping, no more chopping." The farmer who spoke earlier shuddered and said hurriedly, "Hey! Don't. What's there to be afraid of?" The 2 farmers weren't the only ones who heard 7th cultivator of true virtue's roar. On the official road outside Qinling Mountains, pedestrians with sensitive ears could vaguely hear the beast-like roar coming from inside Qinling Mountains. Some of the more timid people rushed into Chang'an City. News of unknown beasts in Qinling Mountains spread like wildfire. Reporting! Come in. Li Er, who was in Ganlu Palace, couldn't help but frown when he heard a soldier asking for an audience. "Your Majesty, I heard many people at the city gate saying that there are beasts roaring in Qinling Mountains. I thought that Sir Li and General Dugu are still in Qinling Mountains with their army, so I'm here to report to your Majesty." The person who came was Dugu Feiying's colleague, one of Zhuo Wui's soldiers. After Dugu Feiying went to Snake Spirit Mountain with Li Zishuan, he temporarily took over that guy's position and guarded the city gate. "There are beasts in Qinling Mountains?" Li Er's expression changed when he heard that. He stood up and asked Zhao Song, "How's Dugu Xian and the rest? Have they started attacking the mountain?" Zhao Song quickly went forward and cupped his fist. "Your Majesty, according to the latest report from General Dugu, the 2 doctors from the Imperial Physician Department that Dugu Feiying brought with him yesterday have already concocted the antidote to the poison in Snake Spirit Mountain this morning. They should have started attacking the mountain in the afternoon." "What? Looks like there's a change in the Snake Spirit Mountain." Li Er's face became gloomy. He frowned and sat back on the dragon throne, worriedly saying, "At the foot of Snake Spirit Mountain." The atmosphere was extremely solemn. Dugu Xian, who had always been cold and aloof, now looked even colder than before. It was as cold as ice. "Dr. Wang, Dr. Qin, please bring some people to help treat the poisoned and injured soldiers." Dugu Xian frowned and said in a deep voice as he looked at the wounded in the camp. Don't worry, General. We know. We will do our best to treat him. The two doctors from the Imperial Physician Department hurriedly cupped their hands and said. Dugu Xian nodded. Seeing that Wang and Qin had gone to the side, he said to Dugu Feiying, Feiying, do an inventory of the army and count the casualties. When he mentioned the word casualties, everyone could hear the slight tremble in his voice. Yes, big brother. When he saw that only Li Zishuan and Dugu Xian had returned, Dugu Feiying had already guessed that something big must have happened on the mountain. When he heard his elder brother's orders, his heart ached. He opened his mouth, wanting to persuade his elder brother. However, after hesitating for a long time, he did not say anything and walked away. Bam! After Dugu Feiying left, Dugu Xian sat down on the grass behind him. Li Zishuan also sat down. Ever since they left the mountain, Li Zishuan had not said a word. The sorrow and anger in his heart were definitely no less than Dugu Xian's. As a result, there was a strange scene outside the camp. The two men sat on the grass without saying a word, as if they were a couple who had just finished arguing. If it wasn't for the heavy atmosphere in the camp, Dugu Feiying would have laughed out loud. After a while, Dugu Feiying walked back and said in a deep voice, Big brother! 651 Imperial Guards were injured this time. Your Majesty, 651 Imperial Guards were injured and 215 dead on this trip to Snake Spirit Mountain. This general was unable to complete the mission. Please punish me, Your Majesty. After reorganizing the troops at the foot of Snake Spirit Mountain, Dugu Xian ordered the army to retreat 3 miles. He also ordered the army to send scouts 24 hours a day to see if anyone had escaped from Snake Spirit Mountain. After that, Dugu Xian and Li Zishuan rode out of Qinling, entered Chang'an, and entered the palace. When they saw Li Er, Dugu Xian quickly got down on one knee and cupped his fist. It's just a small sect. Why would there be so many casualties? Could it be that something has happened? Li Er frowned deeply and said, The Northern Yamen Imperial Guards were one of the most elite forces under Li Er's command. Even if only 3 or 5 of them died, let alone 100, Li Er would feel heartache. Thus, when he heard about such a tragic result, his first thought was disbelief. Your Majesty, we had already wiped out the top forces of 7 Cultivators sect, but in the end, they invited a giant 7-headed snake. Dugu Xinhuai once again recounted the events of the great battle in the mountains. After listening to it, Li Er was silent. After about a quarter of an hour, he coldly said, A small sect of Jianghu. First, they assassinated an official of the imperial court. Now, they openly resisted arrest and even dared to kill my army. They must have eaten a bear's heart and a leopard's guts. A mantis trying to stop a chariot is like a mayfly trying to shake a tree. I must destroy this 7 cultivators sect. Your Majesty, the most important thing right now is to send reinforcements at the foot of Snake Spirit Mountain to ensure that the giant serpent won't come down and affect the lives of the people outside Qinling Mountain. Otherwise, the consequences will be unimaginable. Dugu Xian lowered his head and continued. That makes sense. Li Er nodded and said, Summon Qin Xiong, Qing Yaojin, Yu Qigong, Niu Jinda, Li Jing, Zhang Sun Wuji, and Fang Xianling immediately. Yes, Your Majesty. What? There's a giant serpent on Snake Spirit Mountain? And it caused heavy losses to the Northern Yamen Imperial Army? After half an hour, all the important officials gathered by Li Er arrived at the Sweet Dew Palace. After they were all seated, Li Er asked Dugu Xian to repeat what he said earlier. After hearing it, Qing Yaojin's eyes widened in disbelief. Little Xian, could it be the legendary serpent of 7 cultivators? Qin Xiong raised his eyebrows and asked. The others were also shocked. The Tang Empire's military strength was extremely strong. Everyone knew that a mere sect of Jianghu was no match for Li Zishuan. Who would have thought that the result would be like this? Uncle Qin, it's indeed the serpent of 7 cultivators. Li Zishuan cupped his hands and said, Bah! Who cares if it's the serpent of 7 cultivators or the serpent of 8 cultivators? The 7 cultivators sect dared to resist the imperial court's army and even released such a ferocious creature. Your Majesty, this old official requests to go to war and avenge our dead brothers. Qing Yaojin took a step forward and cupped his fists at Li Er. Chapter 512. Your Majesty, this old subject also requests to fight. The 7 cultivators of true virtue is in Great Tang's territory, but they didn't abide by the laws of Great Tang. They assassinated the court officials and ambushed the army. If such arrogant people aren't severely punished, the imperial court will lose face. Your Majesty, if you give me 5,000 troops, this subject will definitely take down the 7 cultivators of true virtue in one fell swoop. In the first year of Zhenguan, Great Tang was peaceful. There were basically no large-scale wars. Therefore, these old generals had long been bored to death. Now that they heard that there was a force in Great Tang that dared to jump out and fight against the imperial court, they were both angry and excited. As soldiers of Great Tang, they were very proud. Now that the elite Northern Yamen imperial army had suffered heavy losses because of a small sect, they naturally had reason to be angry. However, anger was anger, and the thought of fighting a war made them excited. The soldiers of Great Tang were never afraid of war. They were only afraid of not having a war to fight. Therefore, after hearing Qing Yaojin request to fight, how could Yuqi Jingde sit still? He quickly jumped out and said loudly, Ha! Old Black, you still need 5,000 troops? How could Qing Yaojin be willing to let Yuqi Jingde steal the limelight? He quickly jumped out and retorted, As long as your Majesty is willing to give me 3,000 elites, I'll definitely be able to destroy the 7 cultivators of true virtue in 3 days. If not, I'm willing to offer my head to you. In Qing Yaojin's view, the other party was just a group of people from Jianghu. He had met many of them in his early years, so he felt that those free and undisciplined Jianghu people couldn't be compared to the disciplined and well-trained imperial court army. He said 3,000 troops just now because he was giving face to 7th cultivator of true virtue. Otherwise 2,000 would be enough. However, it was clear that this old man didn't have the slightest idea of the situation. If the 7 cultivators of true virtue sect was so easy to take down, Li Zishuan and Dugu Xian wouldn't have returned in defeat with the 4,000 Northern Imperial Army soldiers under their command. You, lunatic Qing, are you really trying to go against me? Yuqi Jingde glared at him and cursed. Seeing that these 2 old fellows were about to fight again, Qin Xiong quickly grabbed Qing Yaojin and said, Ji, don't mess around in front of His Majesty. This Snake Spirit Mountain is not as simple as you think. Lord Li Jing also stepped forward and said, What Xu Bao said makes sense. If the 7 cultivators of true virtue sect was really so easy to deal with Little Xian and Dugu Xian's ability, they wouldn't have caused the Northern Yamen's imperial army to suffer such heavy losses. Therefore, the most important thing right now is to figure out how powerful the 7 cultivators of true virtue Great Serpent that Little Xian and Dugu Xian encountered was. Only then can we make the appropriate deployment. This was one of the reasons why Li Jing was the war god of the Great Tang, while Qing Yaojin and Yuqi Jingde were not. Every time they encountered a war, Li Jing was the calmest. He could always see the most crucial problem. Li Er nodded his head and praised, Medicine Master is worthy of being called a Medicine Master. Today, I called all of you here so that you can think of a way to thoroughly kill that 7th cultivator of true virtue on the Serpent Spirit Mountain. Otherwise, if such ferocious beasts were to spread among the people would definitely be plunged into misery and suffering. Dugu Xen, Why don't you tell the other ministers about the size, speed, and lethality of the seventh cultivator of true virtue? This subject obeys your majesty. Dugu Xian cupped his fists and replied in a loud and clear voice. Then, he turned around and continued to speak to everyone. Minister Fang, generals, the overall strength of that seventh cultivator of true virtue is above that of a great grandmaster. In terms of strength alone, it is much stronger than a great grandmaster. Therefore, it is very difficult to defeat it with brute force. Moreover, its body is covered with a layer of hard scales. It is very difficult for ordinary swords to break its defense. Seventh cultivator of true virtue has 7 heads, and each of them can be used to attack. Its fangs are highly poisonous, and its mouth can spray poisonous fog. Anyone who touches it will die. However, in terms of speed, seventh cultivator of true virtue is inferior to that of a great grandmaster. At best, it can only be compared to a peak great grandmaster. In addition, the strength of its tail is also very great. If an ordinary person is hit by its tail, even if they don't die, they will be seriously injured. Silence. After Dugu Xian finished speaking, the sweet dew hall fell into silence for a while. Everyone was shocked by the fighting strength of seventh cultivator of true virtue. Yuqi Jingda and Qing Yaojin, who had previously boasted that they only needed 5,000 or 3,000 elites to destroy it, no longer dared to say such words at this moment. The 2 old generals were so shocked that they couldn't help but swallow their saliva. Fang Xianling came back to his senses and stepped forward. Your Majesty, this old subject believes that the most important thing right now is to send an army to seal off Snake Spirit Mountain. Otherwise, the people around Qinling Mountain will suffer a calamity. At that time, the people of Chang will also panic and not be able to work. Therefore, this old subject earnestly requests Your Majesty to make a decision as soon as possible. Zhang Sun Wuji also stepped forward and cupped his hands. This old subject agrees. Such an important matter shouldn't be delayed. We can't let a mere Jianghu sect affect the stability of the people. Li Er nodded and said, Xianling and Xuanling's words are reasonable. Medicine Master, in your opinion, how should we deal with this seventh cultivator of true virtue? Li Jing frowned. He stepped forward and thought for a long time before replying. Your Majesty, this old subject heard that the terrain of Snake Spirit Mountain is steep and the mountain path is narrow. Many places can only allow one person to pass through. Even if we send 10,000 troops, I estimate that we can only display the strength of 1,000 people on Snake Spirit Mountain. Such a terrain is extremely unfavorable for an army to fight. Presumably, the reason why the Northern Yaman's imperial army was defeated this time is related to this unfavorable terrain. Therefore, this old subject believes that if we want to kill seventh cultivator of true virtue with the least casualties, we must send an army with heavy crossbows to surround Snake Spirit Mountain and lead it to the foot of the mountain. Then, we can use the heavy crossbows to destroy it in one fell swoop. Li Er nodded and said with a smile, Well, Medicine Master's method is quite reliable. What do you think? The rest of the people in the hall couldn't help but nod in agreement. Only Qin Qiong frowned and pondered. After a while, he asked Li Jing, Medicine Master's method is reliable, but what should we do to lead seventh cultivator of true virtue to the foot of the mountain? When Fang Xianling and the others heard this, they couldn't help but cast a puzzled look at Li Jing. Li Jing shook his head and said, Shu Bao, we can discuss this problem later. Just now, Prime Minister Fang also said that the most important thing now is to send an army to surround Snake Spirit Mountain and prevent seventh cultivator of true virtue from going down the mountain to harm the people. We will first surround Snake Spirit Mountain and not attack it. If seventh cultivator of true virtue comes down the mountain, we can use the heavy crossbows to kill it. If it doesn't come down the mountain, we will think of another way. In any case, we must send an army to Snake Spirit Mountain. What a good idea! After Li Jing finished speaking, Qin Xiong stepped forward and cupped his hands to Li Er. Medicine Master has thought it through thoroughly. This old subject has no objections. Your Majesty, please send troops as soon as possible. The rest of the people also cupped their hands and said, "This subject agrees. Your Majesty, please send troops as soon as possible." Chapter 513. Ganlu Palace. Li Er looked at all the officials in the hall and nodded slightly. He was about to issue an edict to dispatch troops when he suddenly glanced at Li Zixuan, who was standing behind with his head bowed and not saying a word. Doubt arose in his heart and he deliberately stopped the words that had already reached his mouth. "Li Zixuan, what do you think of Medicine Master's plan?" As soon as Li Er's voice fell, everyone in the hall suddenly realized that Li Zixuan was too quiet today. Fang Xianling, Zhang Sun Wuji, Qing Yaojin, and the others had discussed matters with Li Zixuan in the imperial court before. They were well aware of Li Zixuan's character. That was why they felt that Li Zixuan's behavior today was too abnormal. Actually, when Li Zixuan entered the Ganlu Palace today, he had been silently standing in the corner. Other than answering Qin Xiong's question, he didn't say anything else. His heart was filled with anger and sorrow, but most of all he was deeply remorseful. 215 young lives, how innocent were they? Now, because they helped him take revenge, they didn't even have a corpse. This represented 215 families. Because of him, Li Zixuan, there was going to be a tragedy of people dying before their own. You could say that he was a saint, but every time Li Zixuan thought of this, his heart would bleed. It wasn't that he couldn't bear to see people die, but he couldn't bear to see people die for him. If the heavens could give him another chance to choose again, he would stop this war without hesitation. He would rather think of a way to slowly kill the flying snakes than to implicate innocent people. Li Zixuan, I'm asking you a question. Li Er, who was sitting at the top, saw that Li Zixuan was still indifferent. He couldn't help but raise his voice and call out, "Your Majesty, I'm here." Actually, when Li Zixuan called him for the first time, he had already heard it. The reason why he didn't answer was because he was thinking of a very important matter. At this time, he had no choice but to answer. "I just asked you, what do you think of Medicine Master's plan to kill the snakes? Why aren't you answering?" Li Er asked with a frown. Although he wouldn't punish Li Zixuan for such a small matter, he was still a little unhappy. Li Zixuan cupped his hands and said, "Your Majesty, this humble subject thinks that Uncle Li's strategy of surrounding but not attacking is very reliable. I was blaming myself for the 215 soldiers who died. I was lost in thought for a moment, so I didn't hear what Your Majesty said. Please punish me, Your Majesty." Li Er suddenly understood. With a complicated expression, he said, "Soldiers are trained for 1,000 days to be used in a single moment. Those 215 Northern Yamen Imperial Guards did not die on the battlefield, but died in the belly of a snake. It was truly a pity." However, seventh cultivator of true virtue is a scourge to the people of Great Tang, and these soldiers have sacrificed their lives to make a contribution to the people of Great Tang. They are all meritorious officials, and I will ask the Ministry of War to draw up a pension plan for them. So Li Zixuan, you don't have to blame yourself too much. It would have been better if Li Er didn't say anything, but as soon as he did, Li Zixuan felt as if a knife was twisting in his heart. He took 2 steps forward, knelt on one knee, and saluted. "Your Majesty, this time, the attack on Snake Spirit Mountain was mainly because of this humble subject, but this humble subject didn't expect that more than 200 soldiers would die without a trace. How can this humble subject not blame myself? This humble subject mostly agrees with Uncle Li's strategy of surrounding but not attacking. However, this humble subject has something to add, and I hope Your Majesty will approve." Li Er frowned and said solemnly, "Speak." "Your Majesty, This humble subject thinks that we should send the army to surround the mountain with heavy crossbows. If seventh cultivator of true virtue comes down the mountain, we should use the heavy crossbows to drive it back to the mountain and prevent it from harming the people. As for killing the snake, Your Majesty, give this humble subject 3 days. This humble subject will definitely make the entire 7 cultivator of true virtue and that evil beast pay with their blood within 3 days. Inside the main hall, although Li Zishuan's voice was soft, it was very firm, and everyone could feel the cold killing intent in his voice. Your Majesty, this humble subject also requests to go to war. This humble subject cannot absolve himself from the blame for this defeat. I hope that Your Majesty will give this humble subject a chance to atone for his mistakes. After hearing Li Zishuan's words, Dugu Xian thought that Li Zishuan was going to personally lead the army to kill the snake again. Therefore, he quickly cupped his fists and said. Li Er frowned and said, "Earlier, Medicine Master said that the terrain of Snake Spirit Mountain is rugged and not suitable for an army to fight. You two have just come down from the mountain, so you should know better. Why do you want to attack the mountain again? In any case, I won't send the army to attack the mountain before all of you come up with a foolproof plan. You can't let your emotions affect your decisions when marching to war." Li Zishuan shook his head and said, "Your Majesty, this humble subject has no intention of leading the army to attack the mountain again. What this humble subject means is that this humble subject alone is enough to deal with the 7 cultivator of true virtue and 7th cultivator of true virtue." What? Li Er's eyes widened and he suddenly stood up. His hawk-like sharp eyes swept over Li Zishuan's face as he said word by word, "Li Zishuan, is what you just said true?" The officials in the hall were all inexplicably shocked. Qin Qiong's reaction was faster. He hurriedly came over and pulled Li Zishuan's arm, saying anxiously, "Little Xian, this old man knows that you blame yourself, but you can't ignore reality just because you're eager for revenge." Li Zishuan shook his head and thanked Qin Qiong. Then, he looked at Li Er and said solemnly, "Your Majesty, what this humble subject said just now is absolutely true. This humble subject only needs the Imperial Army to seal off Snake Spirit Mountain for 3 days. Within 3 days, this humble subject alone can destroy the 7 cultivator of true virtue in one fell swoop. This humble subject's enmity with the 7 cultivator of true virtue is a personal grudge. This humble subject doesn't want innocent people to lose their lives because of this. Your Majesty, please grant my wish." Fang Xianling secretly nodded and thought that this child's nature was really kind. When he saw that Li Er was about to speak, he quickly stepped forward and said, "Your Majesty, please wait. This humble subject has something to say." Li Er said, "Minister Fang, please speak." "Thank you, Your Majesty." Fang Xianling cupped his hands to Li Zishuan, then turned his head to look at Li Zishuan and said, "This old man is very pleased that Li Zishuan is brave and fearless and loves his soldiers like his own children. Although this old man doesn't know martial arts, after listening to General Dugu's description, I know that the 7 cultivator of true virtue in Snake Spirit Mountain is not something that can be defeated by a single person. As the saying goes, a gentleman doesn't stand under a collapsing wall. Li Zishuan originally had a heavy responsibility, so don't put yourself in danger because of a momentary impulse." Obviously, Fang Xianling cherished talents and didn't want Li Zishuan to throw his life away. Li Er also nodded and said, "Minister Fang's words are reasonable. Li Zishuan, the enmity between you and the 7 cultivator of true virtue isn't a personal grudge. You are a courtier and represent the imperial court. If they dare to assassinate you, it means that they are looking down on the prestige of the country. I won't tolerate them. Therefore, you don't have to take the risk alone. As for the 7 cultivator of true virtue, I will deal with them in another way." Li Zishuan felt helpless. He didn't want to attack the mountain alone. He wasn't an idiot, so of course, he wouldn't foolishly throw his life away. Thank you for your concern, Your Majesty and Minister Fong. However, this humble subject didn't say that out of impulse, nor did I put myself under a collapsing wall. This humble subject is confident that he can destroy the 7 cultivator of true virtue by himself. Chapter 514. Southeast of Chang and City, Dunhua Square. A rich and powerful house. Granduncle, Li Zixuan and Duguexin just returned to the city. In an elegant room deep in the courtyard, a white-clothed man cupped his hands and smiled at the old man. The green-clothed old man sat on his knees on the couch, leisurely brewing tea. His posture was calm and elegant, neither hurried nor slow. After the tea boiled, he poured himself a cup, then leisurely opened his mouth with a smile. "Oh, Xianji, judging from your expression, Li Zixuan and Duguexin must have returned in defeat, right?" The white-clothed man cupped his hands and said, "Granduncle is wise. I heard that the Northern Yamen Imperial Army suffered heavy losses on Snake Spirit Mountain. Li Zixuan probably came back to ask for reinforcements from the Imperial Court." The blue-clothed old man put the teacup under his nose and sniffed it. Then, he narrowed his eyes with a satisfied expression. That was expected. Young people nowadays are like newborn calves who are not afraid of tigers. It's good to be impulsive, but if they don't know the immensity of heaven and earth, they will definitely fall down a few times. Xianji, you have to take this as a lesson. Xianji understands. Thank you for your teachings, Granduncle. Hearing the old man's endless preaching, the white-clothed man didn't show any impatience on his face. Instead, he seriously cupped his hands and nodded. After a while, he frowned and asked tentatively, "Granduncle, you don't seem to be optimistic about the Northern Yamen Imperial Army besieging the 7 Cultivators sect." Xianji doesn't understand. Is the 7 Cultivators sect really that strong? The blue-clothed old man glanced at the young man with a smile that wasn't a smile and said, "They might not be strong. However, how can the things in the world be measured simply by strength? Taking advantage of the situation and borrowing the power of others can defeat the strong. And although the 7th cultivator of true virtue sect is small, it has an extraordinary item." Xianji understands. But what is this extraordinary thing that Granduncle is talking about? The old man waved his hand and smiled. I won't tell you now, but you'll know in a few days when the 7 cultivators of true virtue is destroyed. The young man's expression changed as he asked, "Granduncle, didn't you say that you were optimistic about the 7 cultivators of true virtue before? Now, why are you claiming that the 7 cultivators of true virtue is about to be destroyed?" Oh you. The old man put down the teacup and said with a sigh, "His Majesty has always been a man who likes to make grand achievements. This time, the Imperial Army lost face in front of a small 7 cultivator of true virtue and returned in defeat. How could His Majesty not be angry? Before sunset, there will definitely be a general leading at least 5,000 elites out of the city." Facing the power of the entire imperial court, the 7 cultivators of true virtue is no different from a mantis trying to stop a chariot. Their destruction is only a matter of time. The young man nodded and said regretfully, "Unfortunately, we couldn't borrow the hands of the 7 cultivators of true virtue to get rid of Li Zixuan. I heard that the sect leader of the 7 cultivators of true virtue is a peak Grandmaster realm expert, but I didn't expect that even he couldn't stop Li Zixuan. It's really annoying. Xianji, Granduncle has told you before that the Jianghu is just a bunch of weeds, not enough to make plans. Granduncle never expected them to be able to get rid of Li Zixuan in the battle against the 7 cultivators of true virtue." The old man first lectured him earnestly. Then, he smiled and said, "However, it's not like the 7 cultivators of true virtue didn't completely fail. This time, Li Zixuan brought 4,000 northern Yamen's imperial army with him, but he still failed to take down the 7 cultivators of true virtue and even suffered heavy casualties. His Majesty is bound to be dissatisfied with him. Once the Emperor's favor falls, what right does Li Zixuan have to oppose us? The young man smiled and said, Granduncle is right. It seems that the 7 cultivators of true virtue has helped us a lot. The old man nodded and looked at the young man. That's true, but we can't completely rely on outsiders. Xianji, Granduncle asked you to meet with the other clans to discuss the matter of getting rid of Li Zixuan. How are the arrangements coming along? The young man's smile disappeared as he cupped his hands and said solemnly, Granduncle, don't worry. Everything has been arranged properly. 3 days later, we'll meet at the Grand Hyatt restaurant to discuss the matter. The old man smiled with satisfaction and said, Good. But don't make a fuss. His Majesty has been keeping a close eye on the aristocratic families. Don't let him find out that our clans are secretly communicating. Xianji understands. I'll be very careful. Little Xian, why do you have to put on a brave front? Although the 7 cultivators of true virtue is protected by the 7 cultivators of true virtue serpent, if His Majesty were to send a large number of troops to attack it, he would definitely be able to take it down in one fell swoop. Why do you have to put on a brave front? If something were to happen to you, your father and mother would be there, and I, old Qing, wouldn't have the face to see them. On the Vermilion Bird Avenue, Qing Yaojin stood beside Li Zixuan and nagged at him in disappointment. At this moment, Qing Yaojin was like an old woman in her 70s or 80s, nagging endlessly. Li Zixuan didn't mind Qing Yaojin's nagging because he knew that Qing Yaojin was truly treating him as his own nephew. He patted Big White's head and turned to Qing Yaojin seriously. Uncle Qing, I don't want to implicate the other soldiers because of my personal grievances. We're all born and raised by our parents, and there's no such thing as who should die for whom. The 215 soldiers who died on Snake Spirit Mountain are the biggest mistake I, Li Zixuan, have ever made in my life, and also the biggest guilt in my heart. I'm afraid I won't be able to repay what I owe them in this lifetime. A person's life is like a plant's autumn, and living in debt will always make one unhappy. I don't want to owe more debt, so I want to settle the 7 cultivators of true virtues matter by myself. Qing Yaojin was stunned in place. At this moment, he thought of those brothers who had sacrificed themselves in the war with him in his early years. Many of them had blocked knives and arrows for him. Therefore, at this moment, his heart was surging with waves and extremely complicated emotions. After a long silence, he patted Li Zixuan's shoulder and sighed. Good child, don't blame yourself too much. As soldiers of the great Tang, it's indeed their regret that they didn't die on the battlefield, but serving the Emperor's order and repaying his kindness is also the responsibility of a subject and a soldier. His Majesty will also compensate them well. Li Zixuan shook his head and said, Uncle Qing, although you say that, I still can't get over the hurdle in my heart. Although I want to destroy the 7 cultivators of true virtue by myself so that the innocent soldiers won't be implicated, I also want to take revenge for the 215 heroic souls with my own hands. I know Uncle Qing is worried that something will happen to me, but you don't have to worry. I never do things that I'm not sure about. Qing Yaojin smiled and said, Heh? That's true. But this time, your tone is a bit too big. That's a Jianghu sect guarded by a fierce beast comparable to a great grandmaster. Li Zixuan smiled and said, Uncle Qing, do you believe me? Qing Yaojin laughed and said, Ha ha. Fang Xianling, Yuqi Laohe, and even His Majesty might think that you're bragging, but I believe you. Although you're not willing to tell us the specific methods, how can we, these old fellows, guess your crafty ideas? I'll just stay at home and watch the show. But if you have anything you need help with, don't be embarrassed to say it because you can't put aside your face. Chapter 5:15. After bidding farewell to Qing Yaojin, Li Zishuan rode his horse to the barracks of the Right Guards in the south of the imperial city. After a short discussion in the Sweet Dew Hall, Li Er finally decided to let Niu Jinda lead 6,000 elites of the Right Guards into the Qinling Mountains and join forces with the Northern Imperial Army. They would use 10,000 troops to completely seal off the Snake Spirit Mountain. The reason why Li Er didn't choose Qin Xiong was because he felt that Qin Xiong hadn't fully recovered from his injuries. The reason why he didn't choose Qing Yaojin and Yuqi Jingda was because he felt that those two old fellows were too impulsive. There was no need to use a sledgehammer to kill a chicken. After the discussion, Dugu Xian didn't have the time to rest and quickly left the city to find his troops at Qinling Mountains. As for Niu Jinda, the general of the Right Wei, he naturally returned to his home, to gather his troops and prepare for battle. "Little Xian, you're here." After gathering the troops, Niu Jinda came to the commander's tent and greeted Li Zishuan, who had been waiting inside for a long time. Li Zishuan quickly stood up and said, "Yes, Uncle Niu, I'll have to trouble you this time." Niu Jinda shook his head and laughed. "Ha! What do you mean by hard work? How can this old man disobey His Majesty's orders? Besides, you're half a son-in-law to Shu Bao, so why are you being so polite?" Li Zishuan nodded and cupped his hands. "Since that's the case, this young man will accept Uncle Niu's kindness. However, this time, this young man has something to tell Uncle Niu." Niu Jinda stretched out his hand and said, "Little Xian, tell me." Li Zishuan frowned and said in a deep voice, "Uncle Niu, this time, when you lead the army to surround the Snake Spirit Mountain, you must adhere to the strategy of surrounding it and not attacking, because the terrain of the mountain is too steep. Also, the sect leader of the 7 cultivators of virtue, Yin Batian, has already been seriously injured by us, so he shouldn't be a threat. However, the 7 cultivators of virtue's poison techniques are mysterious and unpredictable, and they have the ability to harm people in a large area. Uncle Niu, you must be careful. Yesterday, His Majesty had sent 2 doctors from the Imperial Physician Department. They were both experts with superb medical skills and noble medical ethic. At critical moments, they could save a lot of people in the army. No matter what, I hope that Uncle Niu won't let anyone leave Snake Spirit Mountain in these 3 days. At the same time, I hope that there won't be any casualties in the army during these 3 days." Niu Jinda nodded seriously. He patted Li Zishuan's shoulder and said, "Okay. This old man will remember everything you said. This old man also promises you that within these 3 days, not even a single bug will fly out of Snake Spirit Mountain, and the army will not suffer any casualties. As long as those people dare to come down the mountain and fight on the plains, I, Niu Jinda, won't be afraid of a mere 7 cultivators of true virtue." Li Zishuan cupped his fists and said, "Thank you for your trouble." On Snake Spirit Mountain. After the war, the 7 cultivators of true virtue that once stood aloof from worldly affairs and was peaceful and quiet had become somewhat devastated. The mountain path was covered with corpses. The surviving disciples of the 7 cultivators of true virtue were moving the corpses in groups of 2s and 3s. If they didn't bury the corpses on such a hot day, it would easily cause a plague. Obviously, the person who gave the order had some common sense. Of course, these corpses belonged to the disciples of the 7 cultivators of true virtue. After all, most of the dead members of the Northern Yamen army had been eaten by the snakes. "Lu Duong, have you finished counting the casualties of our disciples?" Inside the main hall of the 7 cultivators of true virtue, Yin Batian looked at a disciple of the 7 cultivators of true virtue who just entered the hall and asked with a gloomy expression. Lu Duong bowed cautiously and said, "Sect Master, this disciple has finished counting the casualties. During the war, a total of 38 disciples died, and 26 escaped from the mountain. Now, only 30 disciples are left, and half of them are injured to varying degrees. Batian couldn't help but get angry when he heard that so many disciples had escaped. He slammed the table and cursed. "Humph! A bunch of ungrateful bastards. All these years, this old man has taken care of you, fed you, and even taught you martial arts. Have I ever mistreated any of you? But now that the sect is in trouble, these damned ingrates fled in all directions. They're not worthy of being my sons. I'm so angry." After saying that, he still hadn't vented his anger, and threw the teacup in his hand toward the door. Lu Duong jumped in fright and quickly dodged. "Senior brother, please calm down." Upon seeing this, Flying Snake waved his hand toward the rest of the people in the hall, indicating that they should leave. Then, he walked toward Batian and said, "Senior brother, this time, the Imperial Court's army attacked the mountain. Although many of our disciples died, Li Zishuan's side didn't have it easy either. At least 200 of them died. You should know that those were Li Shimin's most elite northern Yamen army. If it were any other force in Jianghu, it would be impossible for them to achieve such a result. Even if Li Zishuan escaped, he wouldn't be able to avoid being scolded by Li Shimin, right? Moreover, the Imperial Court lost so many people, but they still couldn't take down our 7 cultivators of true virtue, right? After this battle, they definitely won't dare to attack the mountain again. Now we just need to waste time with them. Let's see who loses their patience first." Batian said, "This is the only thing we can do now. Although the northern Yamen army has retreated 3 miles, they are still guarding the surrounding passes. Now, we can't leave even if we want to. Fortunately, we have enough food and 7 cultivators of true virtue serpent guarding the mountain. Otherwise, our sect would have been destroyed by that brat." Flying Snake smiled and said, "Yes." Batian grabbed a jug of wine and drank a few mouthfuls. Then, he looked at the Flying Snake and said with concern, "Junior brother, you used your own blood essence to feed the 7 virtues serpent. It can be said that your vitality has been greatly damaged. With your current strength, I don't know how long it will take for you to fully recover. Moreover, we are in troubled times now." Flying Snake was silent. After a while, he opened his mouth and said, "It doesn't matter. This time, the 7 cultivators of true virtue sect was in danger because I was too confident in the terrain and poisonous miasma of Snake Spirit Mountain. I also underestimated the strength of the Imperial Court's army. Of course, I have to bear the responsibility for my mistake. In that case, if I didn't restore 7 cultivators of true virtue serpent to its peak state, I'm afraid it would have been difficult to turn the tide. As for the future, I believe senior brother won't abandon me." Batian patted his chest and said, "Of course. How could I, Batian, ignore the feelings between fellow disciples? Junior brother, don't worry. Even if you lose your martial arts, senior brother will do his best to protect you." Flying Snake was slightly relieved. He cupped his hands and said, "Thank you, senior brother." "Sect leader. Sect leader. Bad news, bad news." At this time, a hurried shout came from outside the hall. Judging from the voice, it was Lu Duong, who had just left. "What's the matter? Come in and tell me." Batian frowned and shouted. Lu Duong crawled in, bowed, and cupped his fist. "Sect leader, a lot of the Imperial Court's army has arrived at the foot of the mountain. There are even more of them than the previous batch. Now, our Snake Spirit Mountain is surrounded. I don't think even a fly can escape. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.